The Earth was suddenly invaded by monsters, among which dragons were the most formidable. Humanity was forced to evolve, and so the ability users emerged. Yes, the ability users. Our protagonist, born in the slums, had to join the elite training academy at just 10 years old. But despite that, as soon as he arrived, he schooled every single trainee there. Even the genius from a prestigious family was scared stiff, and he didn't even miss a single punch against the drill instructors. Within days, he was hunting dragons like it was nothing. And all right, enough talk, let's get started. If you had to use one word to describe the world right now, it would definitely be hell, because humans could no longer rely on their physical bodies to fight against nature and the monsters. These creatures appeared not long ago, and humans had to use robot-like armor to protect themselves when facing these unknown entities. However, there were countless of these creatures, and they possessed something akin to infinite magic. For example, some could manipulate the minds of others, driving the monsters into a frenzy. They'd go insane, abandoning everything with only the raw instinct to slaughter burning within them. That was the most life-or-death moment for those fighting in those heavy suits of armor. Sergeant Z did everything he could. He pulled out a specially modified gun and fired continuously at the monsters rushing toward him one by one. The light from the gun's muzzle annihilated them, blood splattering all over the ground. His pupils dilated slightly, his eyes bloodshot, and countless explosions erupted everywhere as the area was engulfed in a sea of fire. The thick smoke and intense heat of the armor made it feel like it could be pierced at any moment. The monsters gradually disappeared. Z stared fixedly at the sea of fire in front of him, not daring to let his guard down for a second, because no one knew when disaster would strike next. Just like right now, a blinding blue light appeared before his eyes, and a blurry black silhouette in the distance grew larger and larger in the blink of an eye. A black dragon with wide wings flew toward him. Its form was hideous and ferocious like a god bringing destruction, and every one of its roars could make a person's mind uncontrollably tremble with fear to the point where they couldn't even move. Its pupils shone with a golden hue. Z was the same. He stared intensely, eyes locked onto the dragon. The gun in his hand slipped to the ground. What could he even do being all alone? Just as Z had slaughtered the monsters, the dragon showed him no mercy. It spat out a ball of fire and his armor erupted in flames, the heat so intense that the outer plating melted and Z felt as if his very soul was being scorched by those flames. All of that was just a past memory, but it haunted him so much that he still dreamt of it constantly. For several years now, he had been jolted awake by that dream. Light from outside the window filtered through the curtains in long streaks. Z clutched his face and wiped it. Damn it, that hellish dream again. He ran his hand through his bangs, revealing a large scar over his left eye, his blonde hair slicked back into place. Z looked out the window. He suddenly remembered that today was the day the new recruits would arrive. At the island, which was their base, countless helicopters carrying recruits from all over the world were landing. One of them, of course, carried our boy who looked a bit dusty and had a stubborn gaze quite unfitting for his age. This was one of this year's new recruits. Everything began from that roundup day. Someone from the high-ranking military had caught him and brought him to the interview room. Lee Han, 10 years old, the leader of the orphans, was just a child. The officer in charge placed his hand on Lee Han's file and smiled, saying, "Don't worry, I'm not putting you in jail." Instead, he asked, "Have you ever heard of a place called ARC?" Since it was common knowledge, Lee Han answered immediately, "ARC is the training facility that creates psychers people with supernatural abilities." "You mean to say I'm also a psycher?" The officer seemed very pleased with Lee Han's answer. "You're smart, kid, but you're not just a psycher. You are the savior of humanity. You won't have to live in an abandoned building and starve anymore. You'll live in a proper home and be well fed." Lee Han stared at him. His eyes were completely different from someone his age. "What about me?" he asked coldly. "Am I the only one who gets this? What about my friends? If you want to take me to ARC, you must take care of my friends, give them food, clothes, a place to sleep, and let them go to school. You must promise me." Seeing that look in Lee Han's eyes, the officer couldn't help but feel a bit horrified, because that look wasn't something you'd see on an ordinary person. He went silent for a moment, as if weighing the options. And finally, the answer Lee Han received was a yes. "I will take responsibility for taking care of your friends." The condition Lee Han set was accepted. But of course there was another condition attached. The officer calmly said, "Only if you can survive at ARC as a psycher, kid. Do you understand what I mean? Li Han agreed to the condition the old man set. It was a fair trade, and just like that, the 10-year-old kid Li Han cut his hair and boarded the flight to Ark. The helicopter door opened. Li Han grabbed his backpack and headed toward the exit. He remembered the conversation with that officer. That person had said, "Psychic abilities have different levels, and right now your ability isn't very high, so for the sake of your friends, do whatever you can to survive, Li Han." He stepped off the helicopter and headed toward the headquarters' main gate, walking slowly and steadily with full determination, stopping in front of a skyscraper. Li Han looked up. At the top of the building, the word Ark was written. He clenched his hands into fists. He vowed that he absolutely had to stay in this place and become stronger. A breeze blew, causing his cap to flutter. Suddenly, Li Han heard some noise nearby and looked over, seeing a crowd gathered and making a commotion. In the middle of the crowd, a boy with Western features was loudly berating a dark-skinned boy kneeling on the ground, crying, "You useless piece of trash!" Being dragged here only gets in everyone's way. Because of useless guys like you, I get treated the same way. How disgusting. The boy punched the other kid in the cheek. Even after getting their cheek swollen, they didn't dare to snap back a single word. The only thing that wouldn't stop was the tears streaming down. Some people in the surrounding crowd, feeling indignant at the scene, started shouting, "Hey, who do you think you are? Do you think you're the center of the universe, or what, you brainless idiots?" He looked coldly at them, his pupils glowing as if some kind of energy had just been released. "Your worth compared to mine is like a sewer compared to the ocean." As he said that, he cupped his hands downward and pebbles on the ground began to float up. "I'm a trained psychic, after all." The stone he picked up from the ground hovered in his hand, surrounded by a faint blue glow. The other kids were wide-eyed with horror, seeing him pull a move like that out of nowhere. This was the first time they had ever witnessed psychic powers. The curly-haired boy held his cheek, tears welling up as he looked at the stone floating in the bully's hand. "With an injury like that, I wonder if you'll get kicked out and sent home. This is no place for losers like you. You might even thank me one day. Now get lost." He said that, and swung his hand toward the curly-haired boy. The stone in his palm shot forward, and just at that moment, a hand reached out and caught the stone with perfect precision before it could hit the poor kid. And the one who caught it was none other than Li Han, our protagonist. Holding the large stone in his palm, Li Han remarked, "That's slow. Why don't you just throw it normally instead of wasting effort?" Suddenly interrupted, the blonde kid was clearly furious, his face twisted and his brows furrowed tight. "Who the hell are you?" Li Han dropped the stone to the ground, met his gaze and replied, "The guy who's going to teach you how to live in the real world." Despite not knowing what happened, the crowd was always excited to cheer whenever they saw a fight. Since they were just kids and it didn't involve them, they had no interest in stopping it. Until Z appeared. He stopped in front of them and barked sternly, "You unruly brats!" The two Li Han and the blonde kid who had been throwing punches wildly both stopped in their tracks. The kids instinctively scattered to the side, letting Z walk toward the two children fighting in the center of the circle. Z glared at them and ordered in a sharp voice, "Both of you separate! Now what are your names, brats?" The blonde kid immediately stood at attention and shouted back, "Del Simon." Li Han stared at the two kids, not a shred of sympathy in his eyes. "Del Simon, have you gone through the awakening training for anomalies yet?" Simon's brow furrowed slightly at the question, and his excitement vanished. "It's still just mana, sir." "Is that so?" Z remarked, then suddenly delivered a powerful punch to the boy's stomach. The blow made the boy's body fold forward, his face contorting in pain. A bit of saliva was knocked out of him. He trembled and knelt on the ground, clutching his stomach, while Z showed absolutely no mercy and continued to berate him. "You've grown arrogant with just that garbage." After dealing with Simon, he looked toward Li Han and began to pass judgment on him. "Li Han, right. I acknowledge your act of protecting the weak, but..." Just as he did with Simon, he punched Li Han hard in the stomach, sending him flying back a few steps. He slid across the ground. "If you don't have abilities on par with Simon, you're even worse than trash. Listen up, everyone. Within 3 weeks, you will be promoted to the first year. If you don't awaken by then, you will be expelled." Li Han fought through the pain to get up and looked at Z. The pain still made him wince for a moment. Seeing the skeptical looks from the kids, he said coldly, "Apologies for the late introduction. I am John Z, your instructor. I will turn you pathetic pieces of trash into warriors with mana to fight against the dragons. Introduction over. We begin now. Run laps around the training ground until I, your instructor, say stop. They only had a few minutes to get ready and start running, and of course Lee Han was right there with them. With his slightly torn shoes, the boy started running. He was perfectly fine with the instructors shouting in his ears, even though some of the others couldn't run anymore. They were so tired and gasping for air that they almost threw up. Naturally, Z yelled in their faces, treating them like true weaklings. "You useless fools, stop blocking the way and go home right now." Those two were kicked out. Lee Han glanced at them as he ran by. He was used to being treated like this. He could handle this kind of hard labor. But the thing he was worried about was psychic power. Could he be like him? Lee Han thought as he ran, looking at Simon ahead of him, because in this center, mana was the most important thing. He wondered if he possessed psychic power. As for the kid Lee Han had protected when he first arrived here, it was no surprise that no matter how hard he tried to run, it wasn't long before he grew exhausted and collapsed to the ground. Z walked over, stood beside the kid, and said coldly, "Scum, go home and sleep." With snot and tears covering his face, the boy managed to lift his head and say, "I don't think I can keep going," because his limbs were almost completely worn out. But something unexpected happened, even surprising Z a little, because Lee Han had at some point run over to his side and helped him up. "You haven't given up yet, right?" Lee Han asked with a smile. The other boy stared at him, tears mixed with sweat, and mumbled, Yeah. Z, regarding this action, simply watched in silence, showing none of the harsh attitude he had displayed from the start. The sky gradually turned to an orange sunset. Only then did Z shout, "Stop!" Lee Han immediately collapsed to the ground, lying flat, soaked in sweat. The other kids also sprawled out on the ground, gasping for air. After all, running like that for so long had worn them all out. Z looked them over and said, "So 40 out of 43 remain. That's it for today. Starting tomorrow, the real training begins. Every morning we'll start with a run just like today." Most of the kids here felt like it was a bolt of lightning striking right next to their ears. Lee Han stayed silent, looking over while the kid he was mentoring was still crying, obviously. The next day, the brutal training began. At 5 in the morning, they had to wake up and go for a run. 8 o'clock was breakfast, and by 9, the morning class started with Z in charge. The kids sat upright, waiting for Z to start teaching them how to awaken their own abilities. Think of it as having a center of power within your body. It could be in your head, your heart, or even your lower abdomen, similar to martial arts. Imagination is the most important thing. Lee Han placed his hand on his chest. "I'll focus on my heart." 12 o'clock lunch. After getting his tray, Lee Han started walking around the cafeteria to find a seat. The other kid was, of course, sitting all by himself. Lee Han walked over, set his tray down next to him, and said with a smile, "Let's eat together." The kid's face lit up with joy. His name was Kuro, Lee Han's first friend at the base and in his whole life, really. Lee Han smiled and said, "Enjoy your meal," though he wasn't quite sure why he felt that way. Simon walked by with his lunch tray again, slowing down slightly to glare at Lee Han. Lee Han glared right back. Neither kid was willing to back down, until the other finally looked away. Kuro whispered in a low voice, "His name is Simon. I heard he was trained as a potential top-tier student in England." Lee Han mused, impressed. "No wonder. You can't mess with him. I don't want to admit it, but there's nothing he can't do. I hope we can both use divine power within 3 weeks. Kuro scratched his cheek shyly and said, Actually, I can use divine power." The spoon in Lee Han's hand dropped. His face went dark. He was clearly shocked. "Really, seriously, Kuro, you're amazing." Then he thought to himself, maybe I shouldn't be worrying about anyone else. Then came the afternoon session, combat training, an evening run, followed by washing up dinner, stretching, and roll call. 10 at night was lights out. The dorm was pitch black. Lee Han lay there with his eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. "I can't sleep. The showers, the food, the bedding, it's all much better than my old life, but I want to go home." Before the thought could even fully form, Lee Han shook his head desperately, trying to banish it. "No, I can't go home. I'm not allowed to be weak." 2 weeks passed. The other kids were gradually awakening their spiritual powers, and the number of those who succeeded increased significantly, but Lee Han consistently still had no way. He hadn't awakened his own spiritual power yet. Lee Han started to panic. "What do I do?" He had asked Kuro, but Kuro had just awakened naturally without any secret technique, and right now there was only one person left he could ask. It was that guy Simon sitting over there with his friends. As soon as he saw Lee Han approaching, Simon smirked at his friends. "Oh, look who's here." Seeing that attitude, Li Han knew exactly what it meant. He already knew? Simon laughed, looking for the secret right. But your head is held a bit too high. I thought your country placed a lot of importance on etiquette. Pride wasn't the issue right now. So Li Han immediately knelt down in front of Simon, shocking everyone. Please teach me, Li Han said seriously. Simon frowned slightly, staring at him as if thinking it over. He slowly closed his eyes and told his friends, standing behind him, Stand up, I'll show you. You're the one asking for a favor, so don't you dare complain about the method, got it? Taking the pencil handed to him by a friend, Simon jammed the tip of it straight into Li Han's chest. What the? Li Han grimaced in pain, feeling the pencil tip slowly piercing into his chest. Time slowly drifted by. At the base, you could see helicopters almost every day. Z stuck his head out the window. With a cigarette in his hand, his bangs blowing in the wind. It's already the anniversary of the unification, huh? Time flies. Just then, the door to his room suddenly swung open. A man with a perfectly round head walked in, dripping with sweat but still cheerful and excited. Sergeant Z, I knew you'd be here. He turned his head and walked toward that doctor. Oh, long time no see, Otto. Otto pinched his nose and grumbled, You reek of cigarettes. Smoking isn't allowed in here, Sergeant. He started nagging the moment they met, making Z furious. He scowled and asked, What the hell are you doing here? Otto plopped down into a chair in the room and said, I thought you'd be off duty by now. How are the new recruits? Recruits? It's just a bunch of losers. Otto asked, Why are you being so harsh? Iz sat on the chair across from Otto, his face full of disdain. Well, at least there are two of them. Two, you say? One is named Del Simon. He's a bit of a jerk, but his skills aren't bad. Overall, he's already above the first-year level. Otto stroked his oily, chubby chin. Simon, eh? You mean that genius from the Royal British Training Institute, right? I'm like him, too. I have high expectations for that kid. Same here, I've got high hopes for that kid. Z stood up and looked out the window. A flash of old memories surfacing in his mind. That other kid was truly something else. When it comes to raw intellect, those guys would have to call him Grandpa, a great trait for a soldier, but still, Jack remained silent. We need superhumans, not average people. If you can't use spiritual energy, you won't survive here, Li Han said, while Otto just smiled at Z. Az wondered to himself, What was that second kid's name again? The old man then asked, with an excited grin, Oh, right, I happened to overhear something on the way here. Do you know what the kids are calling you? Z asked. The cuckoo guy, right? Otto gave a startled, Oh! Thinking. He actually knew about that. 3 weeks passed in the blink of an eye. Z stood before the children like a boogeyman. From now on, you are all first-year recruits. However, only those who possess the necessary qualifications will be recognized as official recruits. After hearing that, Kudo glanced stealthily at Li Han, standing next to him, clearly worried for his friend. Z spoke loudly. The foundation of spiritual energy is the spirit core. You can perceive this energy through your eyes. If you can't use external forces, that's fine. If you can wield your spirit core, you will be accepted. Those who can do so line up over by the technician. Those who can't will have someone from HR. And the helicopter over there take them home. Li Han, filled with both determination and gloom, waited for his name to be called. Suddenly, Li Han collapsed, leaving the other children in a panic. They wanted to rush over to see if he was okay. Fresh blood slowly seeped out, staining a patch of Li Han's shirt. He trembled, wanting to touch it. Sweat ran down his face. He gasped for air and asked, Is this the way? Are you trying to kill me? Simon took the blood-stained pencil out of Li Han's hand. He said coldly, Don't worry, it's not a deep stab. Pain makes it easier to focus. That wound, that is your spiritual gateway. Li Han stared at Simon in shock. Simon. I leaned down to eye level with Li Han and said with a smile, Imagine that wound is the place where spiritual energy radiates from. It doesn't just flow out because you clutch your chest. Finishing his sentence, Simon stood up and handed the pencil back to the boy. Naturally, he didn't take it, but deep down, Li Han felt a bit of admiration for Simon, so he knew all along that my core was in my heart. Li Han gripped his chest tightly. I can feel it now. It wasn't this clear before, but how do I make it flow out? There wasn't much time to think. His turn had come around quickly. Z roared, Li Han, you're the only one left. Stop standing there like a statue. Get your feet moving and get over here. All eyes turned toward him. Lai Han squeezed his chest and thought, "Think, come on, think, I can't go back home." As for Jack, he looked absolutely livid. He clenched his fists, his eyes burning with something like raw power. Jack didn't wait anymore. He marched toward Li Han, each step shaking the ground. He radiated a terrifying aura and stopped in front of Li Han, glaring. "For a soldier, the commander's order is absolute, no exceptions." He crouched down, threw his hand into the air and clenched it into a fist. At that moment, Li Han opened his eyes, staring intently at Z. What do I do? What can I possibly do? In that most dangerous moment, Li Han's attention fell on Z's chest pocket. There was a ballpoint pen. Li Han lunged forward and snatched the pen from Z's chest. At the same time, Z brought his fist down a strike with so much force that Li Han's small body was sent flying. There was no time to soothe his own pain. Li Han scrambled to get up and clicked the pen. It was the only way left. Seeing the pen in Li Han's hand, Z finally touched his own chest pocket, his expression filled with confusion. "Kid, that is..." The air seemed to freeze. Everyone held their breath, watching Li Han. "If the gateway is too small to open, then I'll just have to stab deeper." Li Han took a deep breath and plunged the pen into his own heart. Simon, Kudo, and the other children all turned pale. They never expected Li Han to pull a move like this, and the force of the stab was anything but light. How much courage does it take for someone to stab their own heart? Jack, blood rushing to his head, strode over and grabbed Li Han by the collar, lifting him into the air. "You little brat! What the hell do you think you're doing? Trying to die or something?" The pen fell from Li Han's hand and drops of blood pooled on the ground into a small puddle. For the first time in his life, the very first time, he cried. Tears streamed down his face, his body trembling from both pain and joy. His eyes glowed with a blue light. His power had awakened. Z stared fixedly at Li Han, as if contemplating or struggling with something. Finally, he let out a sigh and released his grip. Li Han dropped to the ground. Jack turned his back on him, muttering, "First time I've ever seen a loser like that." Then, after walking a few steps, Z stopped and turned back to look at Li Han, at the child who risked everything to awaken his power, still sporting a hole in his chest and a heart that was bleeding out. With a bruised face from the beating and tears streaming down his nose, he said, "Congratulations, kid." Li Han stood up, clutching his chest where the wound was still oozing blood. A breeze blew by. He thought to himself that he had finally reached the starting line. After everyone had some time to rest, Kudo hurriedly ran toward Li Han. Crying, he asked Li Han, "Are you okay?" Li Han calmly smiled and replied, "I'm fine, not hurt at all." Otto was also overjoyed that the kid Li Han had managed to pull through, his voice raised significantly higher than usual. Even his expression softened completely. "Hey, Li Han, this is your victory medal. Take it." Li Han reached out. A bracelet that was also a watch and a communication device was placed on his wrist. Surprised, he asked, "What is this?" Otto excitedly explained, "This is my latest technological achievement at AC." The device was shaped like a bracelet. Li Han just brought his face in front of the watch. A status line appeared, "User identified Li Han Cadet. Registration complete." Li Han's jaw dropped, exclaiming, "That's amazing!" Otto laughed and asked, Right. If you want to know how it works, then..." But before the old man could explain the functions to Li Han, Z loudly announced, "Focus, the class assignments will be completed soon. You will now be gathered by class. After I check the ranking list of AC, including classes A through D, based on each individual's ability, the current division is based on the results of the 3 weeks of training. But remember, you can move up or jump ranks if you have the talent. To the remaining 25, congratulations on your enrollment. Surely. You all thought I was a jerk until now." The kids shuddered at the mention, quickly looking away. Otto felt helpless as well. Look at how Z held grudges. Z made a calm expression and said, "But first I need to clear up a misunderstanding. I'm not just an ordinary jerk." He laughed and said, "I'm a real piece of trash." Next is the class assignment phase. Class A, 1 person, obviously Del Simon. Class B, 4 people, one of whom is Kudo. That's a total of 5 people who will follow me, Lieutenant. Class C, 5 people. Class D, 15 people. It was no surprise that Li Han was placed in Class D. After all, his spirit power was quite poor, but Li Han was completely unbothered by being placed in Class D because he was certain that he could climb the ranks. After that, Z looked toward another instructor who had just arrived at the scene. Then he said, "These 20 people will follow Instructor Nui Tran here. Ngui was a man with an incredibly muscular build and a fearsome appearance. He had a buzz cut with just a few tufts of hair on top and a bit of hair trailing down, but his attitude was on the contrary, extremely cheerful and friendly. Upon meeting, he bared his teeth in a bright smile and greeted, "I am Ngui, the weapons instructor. It will be very difficult later on, but let's rely on each other and do our best, okay? He's so kind." But the children who had suffered for 15 days under Officer Z felt a chill. The sudden feeling of their hearts being warmed was truly strange. After the sorting, everyone left for their respective dorms to prepare. Lee Han stood still watching Simon head his way. Simon stopped for a moment, then just walked right past him. It was that same arrogant attitude. Naturally, Lee Han noticed the kid walking right behind Simon. It was Kudo. The boy walked along, sobbing in frustration, perhaps still sad, because he wasn't in the same class as Lee Han. As if sensing the thought in the boy's head, Lee Han stood silently looking toward the sun and said, "Don't worry, Kudo. I'll come to where you are soon." The sadness on Kudo's face quickly vanished. The remaining 20 kids on the training ground belonging to Class C and Class D were addressed by instructor Ngui, who said excitedly, "Now we will move to the gym." The gym wasn't far from where the kids were standing. The facilities at AC had to be called extremely modern. They had everything. Ngui quickly stepped to his familiar spot, took a staff that had been capped, and then swung it around, demonstrating his own footwork and staff techniques. His movements were as fluid as flowing water, and each motion was powerful and incredibly beautiful. The kids watched without blinking, all of them left with their jaws dropped in awe because of the techniques Ngui displayed. Moreover, even standing still in the gym, Lee Han could still somewhat feel the wind pressure from the staff strikes. After demonstrating, Ngui retracted his staff and said to the kids, "You must be wondering why humans learn to use swords and spears when facing dragons. The reason lies in the divine power equipment that you kids use. On Earth, there doesn't exist. They're a material capable of holding divine power, but dragon skin and bone can preserve and channel them. Therefore, weapons made from dragons can deal fatal damage to dragons." Lee Han listened and asked, looking worried, "Then how did people catch them when they didn't have these weapons?" Ngui suddenly fell silent, lowering his eyes with a sorrowful tone. From the beginning, it was all one-on-one combat. A single dragon could destroy hundreds of sire. Although there were sires who fought or supported from a distance, the decisive blow had to be dealt at close range with a weapon. They had to stab the weapon into the fatal point and release the divine power. The sires in this position are called strikers. The kids heard this and felt enlightened by the divine light. And involuntarily, a few kids wished to become like that, and Lee Han was no exception at all. Seeing the kids' expressions, Ngui smiled slightly, then pointed to the staves leaning in the corner and said, "Now find a weapon that suits each of you." Lee Han stepped forward, looked over the selection, and chose a long staff with a capped tip. This was crafted this way to represent a spear. Ngui looked at him smiling and asked, "Do you like this spear?" Lee Han nodded and replied, "Yes. The wind pressure I felt every time you swung the spear was so cool. I also like that sound." Ngui smiled, looking at him with a touch of admiration. He saw Lee Han's judgment, and the strength the boy displayed when facing Lieutenant Z was not ordinary. "I dare say this kid must have lived a difficult life. Unfortunately, he already has a talent for combat." He laughed and said, "Do your best, Lee Han. I will also do my best to help you." Lee Han nodded and looked at the spear in his hand, a look of determination and passion on his face. 2 weeks later, during a routine sparring match in the gym, Lee Han's current opponent was a boy with slightly curly brown hair, and both sides looked quite exhausted. Sweat trickled down his face, and his breathing was heavy and ragged, yet Lee Han still had a slight edge. He grinned and said, "You look tired. You can give up now." Trosei laughed, replying, "Ha ha, what are you saying? You're the one who needs to relax and stop trying to drag this out." Suddenly, Trosei lunged forward, his staff aimed straight at Lee Han's face. Lee Han quickly dodged to the side while raising his staff to block the incoming strike, but his cheek was still grazed. Trosei had put all his weight into the lower part of the staff, and since it was too far extended, he lost his balance. Lee Han seized the chance to spin his staff and struck hard. Trosei's staff was knocked from his hand. Lee Han immediately pinned him to the ground, disarming his opponent and maintaining control. He then followed up with a finishing blow aimed straight at the boy's throat. Trosei smiled wryly and raised both hands in surrender. Having defeated the class president, Li Han had now overcome every member of Class D in weapons training. "I learned a lot," Li Han said, reaching out to shake Troce's hand with a smile. Troce was just as cheerful, saying, "You know it. I'll be promoted to Class C next week, and the class president position will be vacant," Troce said with a smile. "I think you should be the next class president." Li Han was stunned for a moment. After a brief pause, he humbly replied, "I can't become class president just because you ask me to." Troce held his staff and pointed at the others, saying, "Everyone supports you. We've already discussed it amongst ourselves." Li Han felt a mix of surprise and embarrassment. He scratched his head, gave a bashful smile, and said, "Thank you, Troce, and all of you." Li Han wondered if he became class president, would he be one step closer to getting promoted? But life isn't always a dream. Z glared at him with murderous intent, declaring that it was impossible. His gaze was fierce, like someone ready to devour another person alive, and that someone was little Li Han. Li Han looked up at Z, feeling a strange sense of déjà vu. In a gym, other officers were lifting weights and discussing the rumor that had just reached them. "Anyway, there's so little entertainment around here, so rumors spread fast. That bastard Officer Z, his madness is no joke. I've been beaten up by him a few times. What a prickly kid. Who is he fighting? A first-year kid." Out on the training field, under the gaze of many, Li Han held a sharpened wooden stake facing the officer. Z used the flames flickering in his palm to burn the cigar in his mouth. The higher-level students who often worked with Z also ran out to watch the spectacle. "Good luck first year. Give it a real go, kid. Listen to that guy." "So what, no one knows who said it?" It was a noisy afternoon. Z dropped his cigar, his eyes shifting toward the 3 or 4 kids peeking out from the window. In the distance, he acted as if he didn't care about the fight in front of him. But in Li Han's eyes, a spark had ignited. His small hand gripped the sharpened stake tight. In his mind, he remembered what had happened before this fight broke out. He had asked bluntly when he was told Li Han would be the class president of Class D. "Is this the only kid who wants to take charge? You're giving Class D to a kid with mental deficiencies who can't even use telepathy. Are you guys serious?" The kids in the room were silent, no one daring to look Jack in the eye or answer him. Jack exhaled, scowling, and said, "Foolish. But I guess you guys have your reasons." To trust him so much, addressing Li Han by name. Z reached out, grabbed a wooden stick, kicked off the cloth covering it to reveal a razor-sharp tip, and tossed it toward the boy. Li Han was startled. He caught the stake instinctively, not understanding what had just happened. Z said, "I heard no one in this class can beat you, so prove it. Come out and spar with me, Li Han." Looking at the wooden stake, he worriedly said, "The tip is a bit deformed." Z frowned slightly and asked, "Why? Did you think I'd get stabbed by a pathetic weapon from someone like you?" "No, sir," Li Han replied. Back in the present, Z took his cigar back and took off his outer coat. He threw it aside. Li Han looked at his opponent and calmly asked, "Are you going to fight me unarmed, sir?" "What else do I have to use a weapon to fight a child?" He tossed the half-smoked cigar aside and said, "The rules are simple. If you can make any part of my body, say my knee, touch the ground, you win." Li Han asked, "What if I lose?" Z replied, "Losing is losing." Li Han smiled and said, "I'm not giving up that easily." And perhaps later on, Z would never have expected him to be so stubborn. After the fight began, Li Han didn't rush in immediately. He slowly twirled his staff and moved to probe while Z raised both hands in a defensive stance. He watched Li Han's movements closely, clearly treating him as a real opponent. The other kids looking out from inside the room were amazed, whispering, "That kid is actually going for it. He's actually quite something, isn't he? But what chance does he have against the drill instructor?" Simon happened to be passing by, heard the commotion, and walked over to squeeze in with the kids at the window, staring out from the center. "That lunatic!" Down below, Li Han had started to engage Z. He let out a shout and lunged forward, swinging his staff at Z from every angle. A child could manage, but Z blocked them all. He didn't even get a scratch, not even a wince. He blocked and countered with effortless ease. But if that was all there was to it, it would have been too boring. Li Han suddenly used his strength to leap into the air, staff raised high above his head, charging forward. He tried to stab the stake at Z's throat, but Z reached out and swiped the staff aside. Li Han lost his balance. Z took the opportunity to grab his shirt and delivered a powerful knee to the middle of Li Han's stomach. Li Han's face twisted in pain. In that moment, it felt like his internal organs had been crushed. Li Han collapsed to the ground, his vision fading. The pain spread throughout his body, but his hand still held the weapon tightly. Z walked over and coldly raised his foot. The force of the wind and the pressure from above forced Li Han to open his eyes out of sheer survival instinct. Z stomped down hard. Li Han had already scrambled away just in time to avoid death, using the stake planted in the ground to slide backward. The centipede slammed its feet down hard onto the ground. Han, having already dove away just in time to escape death by a hair's breadth, used his staff to vault himself backward. With panic still etched on his face, Li Han thought, "Is he actually trying to kill me?" Having lived in that other world, he was all too familiar with the feeling of being hunted. Seeing the look on Li Han's face, Z stared back coldly. "What are you staring at? Dragons and monsters don't pick and choose who they kill. If you're weak, they'll kill you. It doesn't matter who you are. Your fear right now," Z continued, "is nothing compared to a real battle." Shivering, Li Han used his staff to pull himself up. He faced Z once again, that same stubborn look in his eyes. "Sergeant Z, are you planning to fight me with your mouth?" The heat of battle clearly rising, Sergeant Z didn't just stand there. He opened his hand and lunged toward Li Han. "If you want to play, I'll play with you." Z's speed increased. He surged forward and grabbed Li Han by the collar, hoisting the boy into the air before swinging his arm back and throwing him hard. Li Han went flying, his body flailing in midair. But he never let go of his weapon. He hit the ground with a sickening thud. The hard earth slammed into his back, making him tremble from the intense pain. Even his head was ringing. It was hard to stay conscious. An average person might not have been able to get back up after a hit like that, but Li Han struggled to his feet, touching his head. Only then did Z notice something on his own cheek. A cut was bleeding. When had the boy managed to land a hit? Did this kid attack me using centripetal force? Seeing the red wound on Z's cheek, the other kids cheered excitedly. That was something they had all wanted to do for a long time. "Nice hit, Li Han. Great hit." Taking advantage of the brief moment Z was distracted by the wound, Li Han charged at him again with his staff like someone who knew no fear. Z tilted his head to dodge by instinct. The staff swiped past his face. No, that wasn't it. The wielder of the staff had pulled back and suddenly vanished. Utilizing his opponent's blind spot, Li Han used his small frame to nimbly slip behind Z's back. He swung the staff hard, aiming straight for Z's shoulder. Z dodged, but it was a struggle compared to usual. Li Han didn't give himself or Z a moment to rest. He attacked again, this time aiming for the left, but Z barely managed to dodge it again. Li Han didn't give up. As soon as his feet touched the ground, he started circling Z. A smile suddenly appeared on Z's face. It was enough to make your hair stand on end. Li Han stopped in his tracks. He twisted his ankle to change direction, then launched himself into the air, flipping over. He borrowed the laws of physics to amplify the power of his strike, rotating like a spinning wheel. He's going to hit me with his finishing move directly. Impressive, Z thought from the bottom of his heart. The staff slammed into Z, leaving a long red gash across his clothes, while the staff itself shattered into pieces. Z reached out and grabbed the jagged end of the wood still sticking out. He pulled it out, fresh blood trickling onto his chest. Li Han was now weaponless. In Z's eyes, the boy looked as small as a human staring up at a dragon. Li Han had barely landed when Z lunged. With just one hand, he grabbed Li Han by the throat. "Time to finish this right." Z squeezed hard, leaving Li Han dangling in the air. No matter how much the boy struggled, that hand didn't. It didn't loosen even a fraction. Z glared at him and ordered, "Surrender," as tossed the bloodied wooden stake aside. His other hand controlled flames that burned Li Han's throat. The pain, the searing heat, and the inability to breathe all rushed to his nerves. A cry of agonizing pain tore through the air. The kids watching felt an involuntary chill. The situation was getting way too intense. This wasn't holding back at all. The flames grew even hotter. He growled, "Surrender. If you're going to be stubborn, you're going to get wiped out." Li Han ignored him, trying desperately to break free. Hearing the word surrender, he gritted his teeth. Despite the tears streaming down his face from the pain, his body reaching its limit, he spoke each word with resolve. "I'll die before I ever surrender." Just then, Gui Tron arrived from a distance, rushing through the crowd of kids nearby, none of whom dared to interfere. He looked like he had run in a hurry. Sweat was dripping down. Veins bulging on his face, he roared, "Sergeant Z, stop it right now! Are you trying to kill the kid?" Seeing someone had stepped in, Z coldly threw Li Han toward Ngui Tron. Damn it, he wouldn't surrender, and neither would I. What else was I supposed to do? Nguitron rushed over and caught Li Han in his arms. By then, the boy had completely exhausted his energy and began to lose consciousness. Nguitron felt like he wanted to jump in and beat Z up. No, this entire evil organization makes me sick. He pulled his coat back on while the others were making a loud commotion. He glared at the crowd and barked, "Shut up!" The atmosphere suddenly went silent again. Z let out a sigh and adjusted his uniform. Fine. Since he wouldn't surrender, I'll admit he won. With that kind of attitude, what are they even going to accomplish? Nguitron didn't say a word, just carried the 10-year-old child who had been beaten to the brink of death in his arms. The other kids were absolutely horrified by what they had just witnessed. Every word Sergeant Z said next only made them more terrified. That kid managed to overcome his struggles on his own and proved himself. Once he's finished with his treatment, I'll promote him to Class B after this event. Life at the academy continued as usual. In the area for the injured, the nurse in charge, Duena, was having a small chat with Z. She asked with a hint of surprise, "Class B?" Az nodded firmly. "That's right. I'm going to put that in the promotion list." Duena still found it hard to believe. "From Class D to Class B, will the higher-ups approve?" Az stated bluntly. Even if he were assigned to Class A, that kid wouldn't face any obstacles. Divine power is the only thing holding him back. Duena sighed. But the higher-ups value divine power. Z frowned, showing clear contempt. Those empty-headed fools. What we need when dragon hunting isn't a miracle like divine power, it's a will. A will that stays firm, capable of stabbing a weapon into a dragon's weak point, precisely even under extreme fear. In that regard, Li Han has the potential to become the strongest striker. It would be foolish to waste such a talent just because their divine power develops slowly. Who knows, right? "The kid I chose could become the savior of the world," Duena said, surprised. "I've never seen you praise anyone like that before." "Don't you hate Li Han?" Az calmly replied, "No. On the contrary, I quite like that kid." She heard this and helplessly judged him as a cold-blooded man. Lieutenant Z time flew by, and Li Han had been hospitalized for 7 days. Duena was just about to check on Li Han's condition. When she saw a tall person hesitating outside the door, she approached and asked, "Aren't you going in? Instructor Weichen had just arrived not long ago." Carrying a bunch of things, he looked a bit sheepish, completely different from his usual imposing stature. As soon as he heard Duena ask him, he jumped. Duena stepped forward to look at the items in the basket that Wei Chen had brought and asked, "What is all this?" "Just some snacks." "Then why don't you go in?" Wei Chen scratched his head, hesitant, and pointed inside the room through a small glass window opposite the hospital bed. "It seems I shouldn't interrupt." Inside the room, Li Han, who knew not when he had woken up, was trying his absolute best to practice using his divine power. He pointed both palms at a small round marble. The marble glowed with a blue light. Li Han's eyes also gradually changed color as he pushed his focus to the limit. Sweat slid down his forehead. Wei Chen and Duena outside the door were unwittingly drawn into his struggle, looking even more tense than Li Han. Under Li's focused efforts, the marble was finally lifted. Wei Chen and Duena happily turned and high-fived each other as if they had done it themselves. After hitting hands, both suddenly felt awkward and hurriedly looked elsewhere to play it cool. After all, adults doing this kind of thing was pretty embarrassing. That kid, he possesses incredible talent for focus. Duena cleared her throat and said, "Now you can go in," receiving Duena's permission. Wei Chen opened the door and stepped inside. The marble was placed neatly on the table by Li Han, and he let out a sigh. Wei Chen walked in and said, "Long time no see, Li. How are you feeling?" Seeing that it was Wei Chen, Li Han's face lit up with happiness. He said with a hint of gratitude, "Instructor Wei, I'm okay. Thank you, sir." He brought some food to Wei Chen. He said that then put the basket on the ground, skillfully pulled out a knife to peel an apple, and poured some milk for Li Han. "So tomorrow you will return to Class B. I am very proud to see you practicing how to use divine power." Li Han held a skewer with a piece of apple, ate it, then nodded and said, "Yes, because my divine power score is below average, so I thought I could practice a little before returning to class." Wei Chen nodded in praise. "That's a wise decision. No matter how good your martial arts skills are, you still need to be able to use a certain amount of divine power if you want to become a boxer. Percy's battles mainly take place in the air, so you need to know how to retrieve your weapon if you drop it during combat." Suddenly, Wei Chen snapped his fingers, having realized something. After giving Li Han a few instructions, he dashed out and asked for permission from the medical staff on duty at the gym where Li Han had previously trained for a while. Li Han followed Wei Chen. Looking around, he asked, confused, "Instructor Wei, why are we at the gym?" Wei Chen stopped, looked at him, and replied, "Li Han, considering your divine power development level, the possibility of awakening a singularity is extremely low. Unlike those who can summon fire or teleport, it's better not to dream of such things. Then how will I fight?" After Wei Chen finished speaking, his eyes radiated a bright blue light. "The answer is simple. You will push your divine power to the limit. In that way, it could be said that your own divine power is your singularity." Li Han's mouth hung open as he looked at the scene before him because Wei Chen had just activated his own divine power. The sticks behind his back had flown up and were hovering at his command. Li Han instinctively swallowed hard, staring at Instructor Wei. "So, the story about divine power..." Wei Chen hovered in the air, controlling the sticks to form stairs, and slowly stepped down. "Divine power is similar to muscles. The more you use it, the stronger it gets." He stepped onto the ground in front of Li Han and said, "The first level of divine power is no different from an illusion. Your generation has more potential than ours. Don't give up and keep practicing, Li Han." Li Han, full of determination, smiled and said, "Yes, sir." After that day, Li Han fully recovered and returned to class once again. This time he had truly arrived at Class B, but internally it was hard not to feel a bit nervous. Li Han took a deep breath and let it out. Just as he was about to open the door to enter, he bumped into the large frame of another kid who was also just walking out of the classroom. That kid was just about to curse, "What the hell is this?" when his eyes fell on Li Han, who was a whole head shorter than him. Li Han held his red swollen nose from the collision. Tears welled up a little from the pain. The tall kid asked in surprise, "Li Han?" Li Han asked, bewildered, "Do you know me?" The kid patted his shoulder and laughed. "Are you joking? Everyone in the class knows you. Anyway, it's very nice to meet you. I'm the class president of Class B." Saying that, he held out his hand. Li Han also reached out to take his hand in return. Then he asked, "Do I need to call you that all the time?" "Just call me Demichi. I hope we'll become close, Han. You arrived at the right time. It's currently the freestyle martial arts sparring session. Follow me." Li Han followed Demichi into the classroom where everyone was still sparring with each other, so some sounds echoed out. Demichi was still happily explaining the current situation of the class to him, but Li Han's face suddenly changed after seeing that scene. The suffocating schedule of the strong, the pressure that the lack of spiritual power weighed on him, and the anxiety of not knowing when and how he would be discharged from the hospital. Li Han stepped forward, grabbed a stick, his whole body seemingly exuding battle rage. "This will be the place where I vent all the pressure from the bottom of my heart." Demichi hadn't even had a chance to say another word when he heard the sound of wind rushing past his ears. Li Han charged forward with the stick. Demichi hurriedly turned his eyes toward Li Han, seeing only a small figure. He moved at blinding speed and in the blink of an eye delivered a painful blow to the remaining 4 members of Class B, sending all of them sprawling to the ground. Trembling uncontrollably with his staff dropped on the floor, Li Han stood before them and asked, "Does bullying others for their weakness make you feel good?" Kudo, who had been beaten by the other 3, could only clutch his head and sob in defeat. Hearing that familiar voice, he looked up at Li Han in disbelief as he continued, "Kudo's abnormality is his raw power. Does picking on others because they're weak really bring you joy? You should count yourselves lucky that we aren't using our divine powers in this combat class." Demichi watched the scene unfold, his emotions shifting intensely. His lips curled into a slightly manic grin. "Just as I thought," he mused. "He makes me want to face him in a real fight." Going back a few minutes, the combat lesson had just started, and Kudo was terrified he'd been knocked down in mere seconds. The wooden sword slipped from his hands as sweat and tears hit the floor. A classmate holding a wooden sword stood over him arrogantly, saying, "What are you doing, Kudo? Come on, get up." Another guy tapped his shoulder lightly. "Hey, kid," he said, "my turn next." "Okay, I'm third." To Kudo, it looked like there were 6 legs surrounding him. The 3 bullies were closing in. Kudo wept, praying silently, "Save me." In his mind, an image of that reliable back appeared. "Please save me, Li Han." And just like that, as they were beating Kudo to a pulp, Li Han actually appeared and dealt with them using his own staff. Kudo looked up. It felt like seeing the sun after a storm. He stared at the back standing in front of him, unable to believe it. Is this real? Kudo reached out, about to call his name, but Lee Han cut him off. He looked toward Demichi and frowned, questioning, Demichi, is this what you call free sparring in the 3rd class? Kudo's hand froze mid-air and slowly retracted. He never expected Lee Han to call out the class president like that. Demichi rubbed his buzz-cut head. He laughed coldly and replied, This is the way of the strong. Our enemies won't spare us just because we're weak. The weird one here is you acting on impulse to save someone without thinking. That'll only make things worse for him in the long run. Lee Han gritted his teeth, glaring at Demichi. He was furious about the bullying, but what angered him even more was the fact that he couldn't find a way to refute that logic. Kudo looked at Lee Han, worried and helpless. Meanwhile, Demichi picked up his wooden sword and looked at the guys Lee Han had just taken down. 3 guys getting beaten all at once. That's pretty embarrassing. The ones who were hit could only resign themselves to the defeat, powerless to do anything else. Well, Demichi had said it himself. Demichi, full of ambition, said, Enough talk. Lee Han, show us a real fight. Lee Han placed his other hand on his staff and asked, You want to test me? Let the match begin. Demichi lunged first, shouting as he leaped into the air. With both hands gripping his staff high above his head, he swung it down in a powerful sweeping arc. It crashed down, slamming into the staff Lee Han raised to block. Before Lee Han could even counterattack, Demichi charged again, using the exact same move to challenge him. But this time, Lee Han had to use a different technique to defend. If he blocked 2 hits like that, his staff would snap. Lee Han immediately loosened his grip, letting it drop momentarily. After he strikes, I'll break his balance. Lee Han thought, then snatched the staff back up, propped it, and launched an upward strike. He aimed for Demichi's knee, forcing him off balance. Lee Han didn't hesitate, immediately following up with another blow. This ends here. Demichi was sent reeling by Lee Han's strike, his body thrown toward the tip of the staff, but he reacted instantly, anchoring his feet to the ground, and twisting his body to avoid a direct hit, though his chin and cheek were grazed. Ignoring the minor pain, Demichi lunged forward, throwing his entire body weight into it, using the momentum to slam his head into Lee Han's. It was the first time Lee Han had ever faced that level of aggressive fighting. Caught off guard, he was sent flying backward while Demichi landed steadily on his feet. Lee Han scrambled up, rubbing his throbbing head, and grumbled, Damn it, using your head, this is supposed to be martial arts. Demichi laughed manically. Heh, you'd better watch out for my whole body, not just the sword. I've been studying Sambo since I learned how to walk. If I get my hands on you, don't expect your bones to stay in place. Lee Han stood up, leaning on his staff, his eyes locked on Demichi. Is that so? You going to use that Sambo to catch dragons too? Demichi gripped his sword tighter and smiled coldly. I'll strangle the dragons if I have to. The other 3 in the class all shouted and cheered from the sidelines. Go get him, Demichi, the tiger cub from Siberia. Demichi rested his wooden staff on his shoulder and barked at his classmates. Drop the tiger cub part. You guys sound so uncool. Everyone here is just waiting to die, Lee Han thought, looking at them. Those jerks, the way they spoke was harsh, but there was no real malice. He could tell, that it was a tight-knit bond centered around Demichi. Yet his eyes drifted back to Kudo as if he were calculating something. Kudo just didn't seem to fit in with this class at all. Don't you dare look away, Lee Han! Demichi yelled as he lunged, snapping Lee Han back to their duel. Despite the split-second delay in reaction with a desperate effort, Lee Han managed to dodge Demichi's attack. I'm not letting this drag on. Demichi shot behind Lee Han, crouching low to channel his weight downward. Lee Han mirrored him, pointing the tip of his staff toward Demichi. Almost like a roar, Demichi charged forward like a tiger chasing its prey. Lee Han calmly braced his staff against the ground, using the momentum to spring upward and lunge forward. End it, he thought. His small body spun through the air several times, the staff in his hands rotating with him. Knowing that raw power alone wouldn't be enough, Lee Han brought the blow down while Demichi unleashed a sweeping strike from below. The rest of the class watched on as Lee Han looked pale as he landed behind Demichi. Both of their weapons were broken. The tip of the staff fell right where Lee Han was standing. That bastard kept targeting his weapon. Why? The moment Lee Han touched the ground and looked toward Demichi, he saw that guy rushing straight at him, grabbing him with both hands. Demichi grabbed Lee Han's arm and threw him to the ground with a wrestling move. Li Han looked at his opponent in surprise, feeling his body losing balance in midair. Go Dimichi, Dimichi! The other kids cheered excitedly. Li Han opened his eyes hazily. All he could see was the ceiling with Dimichi's foot pressing hard against his neck and his arm held tight in Dimichi's grip. Give it up, Li Han, unless you want me to snap your arm. The kids' cheering grew even more intense. But Li Han had always been stubborn like this, even when pinned by an opponent. Even when held down like this, he gritted his teeth and fired back, "Think you can break it." Li Han yelled, "You've got the guts to do it." This sentence seemed to hit a nerve in Dimichi. A sharp snap echoed out. The kids cheering for Dimichi were startled and terrified by the sound. With a dark look on his face, Li Han's arm was snapped. He lay on the ground, clutching his arm. Dimichi stood up, his gray eyes looking down at Li Han, and let out a breath. "That's why I told you to just give up. Your arm is done for, man." Seeing Li Han's arm snapped, Gudo started crying uncontrollably. He wanted to run toward his friend, but was frozen in fear. Dimichi spoke again. "I'm surprised you didn't scream even when I broke your arm. I'll give you that. Someone take him to the infirmary." Dimichi pointed behind him toward Li Han, not realizing that Li Han had already stood up and was holding his weapon again. Another painful thud echoed out. Li Han held his staff, pointing it at Dimichi, breathing heavily. "The guys who fought you before must have cried over a broken arm." Dimichi was knocked down to the ground instantly. With his body trembling slightly, Li Han endured the pain and shouted, "Get up, keep going!" But there was no response. His eyes had rolled back and foam was dripping from his mouth. "Dimichi!" Li Han called out in confusion. Dimichi jerked awake, his eyes wide open. He finally woke up and saw the white ceiling. Dimichi sat up in a start. Beside him, Li Han had already woken up earlier and was chatting with someone else. A small screen appeared above his watch. The video message playback had finished. On the other end was Captain Kang Bai-han, the one who had brought him to the academy. "Excellent work, kid. You even exceeded my expectations. Thanks to you, Li Han, the kids are all living very well. I'll send you another video next time." Hearing this, Li Han's eyes welled up with tears of joy as he watched the video Kang Bai-han sent. All three kids were attending school properly, smiling and happy. The video ended there. They're still doing fine. They even gained some weight. After a moment of reflection, Li Han realized Dimichi had also woken up, so he took the opportunity to ask, "Could you get that photo for me?" Dimichi had just woken up and his brain hadn't fully processed things yet, so when Li Han asked, he readily agreed. But just as he reached out to tap Li Han's watch, he stopped and snapped, "No way. Why should I give you the album?" Li Han held up his bandaged arm and said calmly, "You broke my arm." Dimichi gritted his teeth and said viciously, "And you smashed the back of my head, you jerk." Li Han replied, "That's the consequence of being careless. Don't you remember the philosophy of the academy you told me about?" This time, Li Han was absolutely right. Dimichi had no way to argue back, so he could only swallow his frustration. Li Han looked at Dimichi and said calmly, "That day I was truly angry, but I don't hold a grudge against you." Dimichi sat on his bed and said with a smile, "Same here. But next time, let's have a real fight." Li Han honestly expressed, "I think I made a mistake with Gudo. Instead of fighting, I should have reached out to him." Dimichi nodded slightly. "I understand how you feel, but he would have died immediately. The moment he became a second-year student. If things just continue like this?" Li Han asked in surprise. "What do you mean, why talk instead of showing me the reality?" Dimichi led Li Han out of their lounge. "Wait, where are you going?" Dimichi walked forward and said, "I'm sure you'd want to see it for yourself rather than hearing my explanation." Dimichi stopped in front of an area with a bright red sign. "Is this the emergency room?" Dimichi corrected him. "To be more precise, it's a place where they can save any life." Just as he finished, a group of doctors hurriedly pushed a gurney with a man who was half dead, covered in wounds, into the emergency room. Li Han stepped back quickly, watching the gurney zoom past him. Even though it was just for a split second, he managed to see the appearance of the person on the gurney. Li Han thought in horror, "What? What is this?" Dimichi watched the gurney and asked, "Can you guess their level of training from what you just saw?" Li Han pointed toward the emergency room, his face filled with confusion and fear. "More importantly, isn't that senior about our age? The one who just went inside must be—" Li Han looked at Dimichi. Even though that guy was tall, that was just too exaggerated. "He looks like an adult, like our instructor." Demichi put one hand on his waist and rubbed his shaved head with the other, as if organizing his words to explain it to Li Han. After becoming a second year, you'll start being given certain types of drugs. Your body will quickly develop and become more muscular. Li Han looked at Demichi in horror, unable to believe what he was hearing was the truth. Demichi held up 3 fingers and smiled. Did you forget? We have to fight the dragons in 3 years. This place doesn't wait for us to grow up. Li Han fell silent for a moment, and then muttered, Not bad. Demichi looked at him slightly surprised. What do you mean? Memories of his less than pleasant childhood flashed through his mind. Li Han said coldly, I've always wanted to become an adult quickly because I have to do whatever it takes to survive. And I still struggled against the adults every time they beat me, biting my teeth and silently wishing I could grow up fast enough to fight back. Against them, the only thing you could do was cover your head and take the beating, only for the supplies you worked so hard to snatch to be taken away just like that. Without a hint of mercy, Li Han looked straight into Demichi's eyes and said, I don't need a beautiful childhood. To me, survival is more important. Demichi exhaled a sigh of admiration. You possess the strongest mentality here at ARC. Li Han lowered his eyes, nodded slightly, and said, I get what you mean. Let's go. After Li Han and Demichi recovered, they continued to the next mission parachute training. Several supply backpacks were neatly placed on the training field. Z said, Just do exactly what you've practiced. We depart at 16:30. Remember to finish checking your gear. Just then, Demichi, while putting on his military uniform, smiled and asked Li Han, who was next to him, We have to join this parachute training right after we show up. Miss the infirmary? Li Han, having finished putting on his gear and strapping the backpack to his front, smiled helplessly at him. Mishi, I get it too, but life at ARC is just like this. By the way, Li Han also checked the supplies inside his backpack. It was full of food. Li Han's expression turned grave. This isn't just simple parachute training. Demichi looked around, frowned slightly, and said, Some idiots are already starting to forget, little by little. Suddenly, Demichi's pupils constricted. He hurriedly tapped Li Han's shoulder and said, Hey, Li Han, those two. That's him. It's really him. He's the genius from the UK, isn't he? Demichi grinned, unable to control his trembling body. I really want to fight him, Li Han said helplessly. We're still in the middle of parachute training. On the other hand, after putting on his backpack, Simon also noticed Demichi's gaze. It looked genuinely creepy, making others want to stay away like he was about to start a brawl. Kudo sat a distance away from Li Han. Of course, this time Li Han didn't approach him either, because he knew that for Kudo's sake that was probably for the best. But deep down, he couldn't help but feel uneasy. In front of them, it seemed some kids were being too slow, so the guy raised his voice again. Stop dragging your feet! Get on the plane, you brats! They put on their helmets one by one and ran onto the plane. The wind from the propellers blew sand and dust everywhere, and their small, unsteady figures stepped on board. Z stood at the plane door, hands on his hips, watching the kids climb on. Once they were all in, the plane slowly took off. Z and the other instructors returned to the base, watching the plane fade away. Az muttered to himself, This will be the last time you little brats have someone wiping your asses for you. The first person we followed when we reached the island was Kudo. He was the same as before, always hoping a familiar person would reach out to save him. Li Han, I saw your shadow. Then you actually appeared. But now, no matter how desperately I waited, I don't see you, so did you not come this time? Kudo's tears kept falling, soaking into the ground. His small body was hanging suspended from a tree caught in his parachute, and couldn't get down. An hour ago, the helicopters carrying the children away from ARC were still over the sea. The kids looked out the windows and then back inside the cabin. The atmosphere was a bit quiet. Some kids were so restless they couldn't stand it anymore, whispering, How much further do we have to go? This box looks ridiculously small. Just then, as soon as he finished speaking, the clock chimed and Z's voice came through. You are currently passing over a desert island. You will land and begin survival training. Your bags only have enough food for 2 days. Depending on how you use it, it will be most effective. The kids were all panicked and horrified. What do you mean, sudden survival training? We have to stay on a desert island for 2 days. Demichi was quite calm. After hearing Z, he just smiled and comforted his friend. This actually seems like it'll be fun. Sort of like a camping trip. Z outside continued the announcement. The instructors will return to pick you up in 1 week. In other words, they had to survive on their own until the instructors returned. After the kids parachuted, of course. The instructors would have to circle the island to find ways to rescue those who botched their jump and fell into the ocean to prevent them from drowning. He grabbed one kid by the collar and tossed him onto the boat. Jack turned back and asked the motorboat driver, "That was the last one, right?" That person looked at the display on his digital map and said, "That's right. I don't think there are any more losers left. Are the kids dispersed properly?" From the start, even so, 7 of them had already gathered and formed a team. Jack heard this and looked toward the island coldly, saying, even though they are just children, they aren't gentle at all. They are just like adults. If they lose control, power takes the throne. Instead of starving, they began to rob each other, and that group of 7 had of course started looting as soon as they hit the island. The biggest guy among them looked at the child beaten to the ground and said, "Thanks for the food, I'll eat it happily." Then a whole bunch of kids swarmed toward the bag and started scavenging for food. "Ha ha ha! This idiot didn't even eat anything." Hey, remember to save some for Captain K?" the fat kid said, then looked at the child, who appeared to be the captain sitting on a nearby rock. He was a child with blonde hair, purple eyes, a ponytail, a headband on his forehead, and a rather handsome face. Hearing himself called, he looked at the fat kid, then frowned and scolded, "You idiots. I told you to collect as much food as possible before sunset." The kids all froze and looked at him. Kay stood up, narrowed his eyes, and asked, "Do you think I brought you here to divide up the food? We have to scavenge for food and rob those guys just like this. That way no one will dare to act like a leader anymore." I don't know what kind of aura that guy Kia has, but as soon as he finished speaking, the fat guy panicked, scrambled to his feet, and shouted noisily, Exactly. And those 2 Demichi and Lee Han, we've got to drag them over here too. We might even be able to take down Del Simon too." Ka murmured in a low, thoughtful voice. Suddenly he spun around, eyes full of caution, looking toward a spot some distance away. A loud noise had just rung out. Ka immediately led his lackeys, heading straight toward the sound. "Did you guys hear that? Looks like our next target." At the same time, out on the beach, a figure emerged from the ocean onto the soft golden sand. Lee Han's entire body was soaking wet. He scanned his surroundings, alert. "Phew, I've already wasted too much time since I fell into the sea. This place is way too exposed." Lee Han looked around the sandy beach. Thankfully, there was no one else there. He turned his gaze toward the forest ahead. He thought to himself, "I need to find a place to hide." He pushed aside the dry leaves to head into the woods. More than anyone, Lee Han understood that those who had grown up without ever feeling what real hunger was like wouldn't realize that 2 days' worth of rations isn't nearly enough. And if they were pushed to the edge, they would definitely choose to rob others for food. Then he wondered, does someone like Simon ever get hungry, I wonder? Speaking of Simon, he had of course safely made it into the forest, though he was feeling a bit annoyed. With the person standing right in front of him, a breeze blew by, tousling Simon's long hair. He furrowed his brows and asked, "Who are you, and why do you keep following me?" Demichi acts like he's possessed. He stares at Simon, then laughs and asks, "You're the genius, Simon, right? Fight me." Simon pauses for 3 seconds to consider it, then just turns around and walks away. That leaves Demichi completely stunned and flustered. "Hey, wait, I don't mean any harm. I just want to beat you, that's all. Hey!" Simon glances back at Demichi, wondering if the guy is actually slow in the head. Adjusting his backpack, Demichi follows close behind Simon, saying, I know that was a bit sudden, right? We've got plenty of time, so maybe once we get closer then." Feeling that intense, frantic gaze locked onto him, Simon finds him incredibly annoying. What a nuisance. As time passes, the first day is almost over. As the sunset fades in the distance, the group of kids led by Ka finally reaches the spot where that scene was unfolding. At first, they were a bit cautious, but upon seeing what was in front of them, their faces broke into mockery. "Well, look at that Kudo's hanging in a tree." Kudo sobs as he looks at them, begging, "Help me, please help me." But the group just doubles over in mocking laughter. Why does this kid look like he belongs hanging in a tree? With that, he leans down, picks up the suitcase containing Kudo's food and supplies, and hands it to the fat guy. Anyway, gotta thank Kudo for all his hard work. Watching the group walk away, Kudo says in a panic, "Wait, you've already taken my bag. The least you could do is let me down." Baka stops, looks back at him, and kindly explains, "If you weren't already tied up, then we would have robbed you and beaten you to a pulp too, so you're actually lucky. Just sit tight and wait for the instructor to come save you. Going a week without food won't kill you, so don't worry. It's about to rain, so you won't have to worry about being thirsty. Maybe. Why do you keep saying maybe? The mocking laughter fades into the distance and Kudo can only cry. You guys are just too much, and it's getting dark. He remains hanging in the tree, sobbing. Who knows where all those tears and snot come from? While crying, he recalls everything that happened since he arrived at the island. Simon's full of disdain voice, "What are you crying for? It's disgusting." Back on the first day, that group of robbers would usually mock him too. "Ugh, your crying is so annoying, shut up." Demichi, though not malicious, had words that also really hurt Kudo's feelings. A real man shouldn't be crying like that. All of these things piled up, making him feel even more miserable. What did I do to deserve this? Why is it that even when I want to cry, I can't do it right? Kudo screams with all his might, crying all alone in the quiet of the night, surrounded by nothing but darkness. And because he cried so much, he starts to drift off. Traces of tears still linger at the corners of his eyes, and his vision gradually blurs. But in this very moment, Kudo seems to see a lifeline as that Lihan Kudo thinks to himself. Lihan parts the grass and comes out, then rushes toward him in a panic. A sense of relief washes over him. Kudo slowly drifts into sleep darkness, engulfing his mind. The image of Lihan running toward him blurs and fades completely into nothingness. All around is just a quiet, dark screen. There's no one else. And who knows how many dangers are lurking. Suddenly, from the opposite side, someone appears to be pushing through the grass. Surprisingly, it's Lihan, looking exactly like what Kudo had imagined. Seeing the scene before him, Lihan is startled and blurts out, "What on earth is this?" The next morning, warm sunlight filters through the leaves into the forest. Lihan sits in front of a tent, whittling wooden branches to make weapons. Kudo wakes up with a start, hurriedly opening the tent flap to look out. It's Lihan's silhouette. Hearing the movement, Lihan stops whittling, turns to look at Kudo, and asks with a smile, "You're up?" Kudo asks in surprise. After Kudo gets up, Lihan hands him a plate with half a chocolate bar and a few crackers. "Here's your breakfast. I couldn't get your bag back, so why don't you share mine?" Kudo looks at his portion, then at Lihan, worrying silently. "What about this? Is it enough for one person? I don't want to be a burden to you." I really should have said that to him, but I'm just so hungry. Kudo hurriedly stuffs the crackers into his mouth, crying and saying thank you between bites. "Kudo, you idiot, you pathetic loser!" He keeps crying, eating, and saying thank you over and over until Lihan is worried he might choke. Letting out a sigh, Lihan says, "Once you're done, let's go find some water." Of course, the survival of the children is constantly monitored by drones in the sky. Their entire journey since landing on the island has been recorded and sent to the command center, where Z is sitting overseeing things. The dark room's door suddenly opens and light pours in. Otto stands in the doorway, hands on his hips, and says, "Z, smoking is forbidden in here." Z glances at the old man and says, "Shut up, Otto." He laughs and says, "But you've set quite the atmosphere, haven't you? Lights off and all that. Seen anyone interesting yet?" R chewed his cigarette, then pointed at the screen. "Look, that guy's totally lost it." Otto followed where R was pointing. There was a kid with curly orange hair wearing a basket on his head to block out the sun on a deserted island. Ridiculous. All that matters is finding a way to survive, right? His name's Kenneth, May noted. He's built himself a pretty solid raft and he's just drifting out there. He's even got some soda bottles. His whole philosophy is just build a raft and head home. Whatever works, I guess. Meanwhile, Lihan and Kudo had just reached the riverbank. They looked at their reflections in the water and Lihan went ahead and grabbed his canteen. He scooped up some water and chugged half of it. After it hit his stomach, Lihan let out a breath and smiled. "It's fine. This stuff is drinkable. Drink as much as you can and bring some extra with us." Phew, the days ahead are going to be rough, aren't they? Lihan wiped the sweat from his forehead. The sun was getting pretty intense. "Let's hurry back to the shelter." While Kudo was basically a dead weight clinging to Lihan and acting like just moving was draining his last bit of energy, Lihan was already thinking ahead to the next week. "If the two of us are going to survive this, we're going to need more food. Is there anything edible on this island? I don't see a single coconut tree. Is this why everyone else is resorting to looting?" Suddenly, Kudo, who had been dragging his feet, stood bolt upright. His hair stood on end and a surge of energy radiated from him. He lunged and grabbed Lihan's shoulder. "Lihan, stop now!" Lihan instinctively stumbled backward, and just at that moment, his foot landed on a small branch right where he had been standing. Once he caught his breath, Lihan checked the spot and realized it was a trap. Looking at the deep, neatly dug pit, a chill ran down his spine. A trap? Even if we didn't get seriously hurt, something like this would have slowed us down for days. How did you know that, Kudo? Kudo hesitated, not sure how to explain it. Lee Han, a bit shocked, pressed him further. Have you seen something like this before? Yeah, I guess. Kudo sat on the ground thinking, trying to explain it, but getting all flustered. It was like sizzling or bubbling, and somehow, by some miracle, Lee Han managed to piece it together. Judging by Kudo's reaction, it wasn't that he was describing it. He had actually seen his anomaly trigger in real time. That ability, short-term precognition. That's an incredibly high-tier rare anomaly. Maybe the extreme conditions on this island are what's pushing Kudo to awaken. Lee Han shouldered his backpack and kept moving. This survival training might actually be a perfect opportunity for him to prove what he's capable of. Just then, at Lee Han's campsite, two shadows were cast against the tent. Judging by the height, they definitely didn't belong to the owners. It was Kay and his crew. Kay pulled the tent flap back to peek inside. Looks like there are two of them. No backpacks here, though. Guess they took them along. The big guy cracked his knuckles and laughed. Should we just stomp this place into the dirt? Kay replied. You said they haven't left for good. They'll be back, probably went to get water or something. We'll ambush them as soon as they get back and try to rest. Since it was a long trek by the time Kudo made it back, he was panting with his tongue lolling out from exhaustion. His legs felt like jelly. Finally back, I just want to collapse. Lee Han smiled. Yeah, let's head in. Suddenly, he stopped in front of the tent, his face turning grim. Lee Han bent down to pick up a stone that had fallen on the ground. Wait, someone's been here. I placed this rock here as a marker and now it's on the ground. There are footprints leading away too. Judging by the prints, there are two different people. And there are a bunch more footprints further out. If they're moving in a group, there's a high chance they're here to loot us. Pack up the tent, we're moving. As much as he hated it, Kudo had no choice but to listen. The two of them packed up their gear and kept moving to a different spot. By the time the sun began to dip behind the forest at dusk, Lee Han scanned the surroundings, feeling wary. We need to find a suitable place to crash before it gets dark. Kudo, can you see anything? Kudo didn't answer. He was lost in his own head. Something feels weird. It feels like my eyes are closing. Seeing he didn't respond, Lee Han turned his head only to see Kudo's eyes. Dad had turned completely white. Spiritual energy surged from his body again. Kudo saw a vision. A tiger was slowly stalking toward them. It was preparing to launch a surprise attack on Lee Han. Facing a massive, ferocious tiger like that, there was no doubt Lee Han would be at a disadvantage and end up getting eaten. Kudo snapped out of it, terrified. With every ounce of strength he had, he lunged forward and shoved Lee Han aside. The stick in Lee Han's hand flew away, creating a large gap between them, and right after, a tiger lunged from the front, aiming exactly for where Lee Han had been standing a second ago. Narrowly escaping death, Lee Han slid across the dirt, his blood running cold as he stared at the massive beast before him. The tiger seemed to ignore the weaker Kudo and focused entirely on Lee Han. Its amber eyes were locked on him, body sleek and tense, letting out a savage growl. Lee Han looked toward his sharpened stick. Lying on the ground. Damn it! My weapon. The tiger stared at Lee Han, its gaze shifting as if it were about to pounce. It roared, revealing its razor-sharp teeth and its grotesque, gaping throat. This time, Lee Han was truly helpless. He squeezed his eyes shut by pure instinctual reflex. But how could the protagonist go down so easily? A ball of fire erupted in the air, flying forward and slamming into the tiger's body with a surprise attack. Just like that, a flame erupted in the air and suddenly lunged, attacking the tiger's body. Its fur was singed and even smoking, and the tiger hurried away because of it. Lee Han was saved in the nick of time. He quickly looked over at his savior, surprised to find someone quite familiar, Chosei, with both hands held out in front. There was a fire burning in front of him. He looked like he had rushed over here in a hurry. Are you okay? Chosei asked with concern, while Chosei pulled back his flames, looking at Lee Han and then at Kudo, his face appearing a bit pale. Lee Han followed the direction of Chosei's hand and noticed a wound on his thigh. Lee Han asked worriedly, Your leg? Chosei looked down at his thigh and offered a forced smile, explaining. His two legs were trembling a bit, as if he could collapse at any moment. Some bastards set a trap, so now I can barely even stand. Saying that, he sat down heavily and sighed. Good thing I ran into you two, Kudo said worriedly. If it's traps, we saw one earlier, too. Li Han nodded, confirming, yeah, probably a masterpiece from the same bunch. Chosei shrugged with a bitter smile. So there's a group of thieves in here, too. And I don't even have any food to take. Li Han asked in surprise. What? Why is that? Chosei chuckled and patted his stomach. Right after my leg ended up like this. I ate them before anyone could steal them. Li Han was speechless, not knowing how to react. Had he always been this goofy? But this matter had to be put aside for now, as it was already getting dark. So the only thing they could do now was to hurry and find a place to rest. Of course, that group of thieves was probably passed out sleeping by now, but Kudo seemed unable to sleep. He sat in his sleeping bag, staring up at the sky, seemingly lost in thought about something. A memory he hated surfaced in his mind back then. He had just finished filming when his father called for him. His father knelt on one knee, grabbed his shoulders, and said, "Just now. When you walked into the airport, the sensors triggered. It seems you have psychic abilities. This is a great opportunity. Kudo, sign up for the academy." Kudo turned pale. "But, Father, what about the movie I'm still filming?" But he ignored everything, gritted his teeth, and roared, gripping his shoulders even harder. "Kudo, if you can become a berserker, you won't have to play the clown like that anymore. And you'll receive fame and wealth beyond measure after the war ends. Berserkers will become the country's military. You can become a legendary figure who commands everyone, and that is why you must go to the academy." His father was insane. Looking at the building in front of him besides cursing, he had no other words for this place. Damn it. The next morning, when the sky had just brightened, Demichi began his daily training routine. One-armed push-ups burning his energy while Simon, of course, was still sitting nearby. Observing him, he said, "You've still got plenty of energy to burn, huh?" Demichi glanced over. In Simon's hand was a chocolate bar, which was his only meal at the moment. Taking a bite of chocolate, Simon said, "We don't have much left to eat. How are you going to last the remaining 5 days?" Demichi stood up, flexed his muscles, and smiled. "I'm the physical type. If I want to become an elite berserker, I have to train at least at this level." Simon angrily scolded, "Stupid berserkers have to fight with psychic abilities." Oh ho, Demichi acted as if he smelled a challenge. "All right then." A cunning smile flickered in his heart, and he put on an act, raising his hand to rub the bridge of his nose, feigning sadness. "Ah, I miss you so much, Li Han. You're the only one who can go toe-to-toe with me." Just mentioning Li Han, Simon seemed to have ingested a stimulant. His hair flew backward, and spiritual power radiated throughout his body. "You've fought Li Han." Demichi saw this scene and grew even more triumphant. Sure enough, he took the bait. "Thanks, Li Han. Thanks to you, he's willing to fight me." The scene shifted to a cave. The cave was quite hidden in the forest, surrounded by leaves and vines. One had to look very closely to notice the cloth hanging down to cover the entrance. Inside the cave, they were building a campfire. Li Han woke up and called his 2 friends to wake up as well. "Good morning, everyone." The other 2 sat up simultaneously. Li Han waited for them to become a bit alert before laying out the plan for the day. "Let's stay together until the training ends. Kudo and I will go find some firewood and food." Li Han smiled as he said this, and Kudo of course smiled and nodded, completely agreeing with Li Han's arrangements. "Chos, you're injured, so stay here and guard the hideout, okay?" "Okay, sorry to trouble you 2. Li Han smiled and said, "It's nothing. Thanks to your ability to create fire, we have an advantage in this survival training." Li Han and Kudo quickly found a river not far away. He looked at the fish swimming in the water. "With fire, it means we can cook these." Kudo scratched his cheek and asked worriedly, "Li Han, but do you know how to catch fish? We don't have any equipment." Li Han looked at him and smiled. "Kudo, thank you." Kudo was a bit surprised to look at Li Han, not knowing why he thanked him. Plus, it was the first time in his life he heard someone and say this to him, making Kudo feel a bit flustered and clumsy. For what?" Li Han smiled and said, "You saved me during the crisis yesterday, and then you found a safe cave." Li Han's expression turned a bit sad and helpless. "I think helping you is the best thing to do. But I realized that I couldn't keep going on like this. So I haven't been able to find any way to face you but when I landed here. I'm completely convinced that you're a psychic genius. You clearly have the power to protect me and even save me. We can make it through this if we lean on each other. Because we're friends, right?" Kudo jolted, struck by this very moment. His entire life had changed. Before meeting Li Han, he had endured a life of extreme hardship, poverty, and rags as a nameless orphan in Japan. A nickname born from the color of his skin, Kudo, was always followed by taunts ringing in his ears. "Cry, baby, stop crying. You're useless. You're nothing but a pathetic waste." That had destroyed him, but now that child is dead. That child now has a friend who believes in him. Watching the psychic energy around Kudo, Lee Han felt a flicker of excitement. This is amazing. It's even better than I imagined. Now here's what we need to do. Kudo peered down of the river. Their reflections shimmered in the crystal-clear water. A fish swam by, but in Kudo's eyes it was more than just a reflection. It's his future. I see it. I can see exactly where the fish are. Lee Han watched the scene before him even more astonished. Kudo is a genius, all right. He was able to use telekinesis from the very first day. If we combine precognition with telekinesis, we can easily catch fish without any tools. Suddenly, Kudo shouted. At that exact moment, a spark flashed in his eyes. The fish leapt into the air, held fast by an unseen force. In the blink of an eye, they had caught several fresh fish. Lee Han cheered in excitement. "We did it, Kudo!" They quickly gathered the fish into their baskets. 2 full baskets enough to eat. They headed back quickly. On the way, Lee Han kept encouraging Kudo. "You were in the zone today. You caught 8 of them. You're awesome, Kudo." Kudo smiled modestly. "I think I'm starting to get the hang of it. Hehe, Trox is going to be so happy." Lee Han grinned, that little monster. His combat skills were improving, too. The 2 of them hurried back to their cave, but once again Lee Han was the first to notice something was wrong. Dropping the fish baskets, Lee Han scrambled off the cliff toward the cave, telling Kudo it would be best to wait outside. The fabric hanging over the entrance had been torn to shreds. Lee Han rushed inside. What had happened? Stopping at the entrance before he could even catch his breath, he looked inside. Trox was knocked out on the ground with firewood and rocks scattered everywhere. And as for the culprit, they had vanished ages ago. The scene shifted to the site where the battle between Simon and Demichi was about to begin. Demichi picked up a wooden sword and tossed it toward Simon. Simon looked at the wooden sword in his hand. Simon asked helplessly, "Do you think this is aerial training? And you brought weapons too. 2 of them." Demichi placed a hand on his head and smirked. "I've been thinking about dual-wielding lately. Looks pretty badass." Simon sighed. "That's not the point." "But why did you agree to spar? I'm excited as hell." Simon said, "If you're really going to compete fairly with Lee Han, then you must be Demichi Ladimi from the Class B leader Victor, right? I heard you were recommended for Class A. I'll see for myself if you're worth it." With that, Simon stepped into an attacking stance. Demichi's eyes seemed to glow with psychic energy, and the aura around him shifted. "Seems like things are heating up." Demichi grinned. "I think I like you." "Let's do this." As soon as the words left his mouth, they both lunged at each other with their swords. Suddenly, Simon planted one foot, firmly shifting his center of gravity downward. The sand under his feet tore up. Demichi almost stumbled, following his rhythm, his sword raised but unable to strike in time. Damn it, he stopped short. This timing. Demichi swung his sword down hard but missed. Because Simon stopped, he wasn't there, and it pushed Demichi off balance. Simon seized the opportunity, thrusting his sword precisely at Demichi's chest. The posture was perfect, the style of a gentleman trained in noble fencing. The sword was still lodged against Demichi's chest, but he remained as calm as could be. He actually seemed to get even more fired up. "Are you done? You didn't think that was it, did you?" Demichi retracted his sword, raised it to shoulder height, and slashed toward Simon. It forced him to step back. "If you back down, I've got the advantage. Remember that." Demichi charged forward, raining down blow after blow. Simon was pushed back, forced to defend with his sword, but Demichi was the power type. He only got stronger as the fight went on. Simon nearly couldn't block a few of those. Need to find an opening. Simon frowned, observing Demichi's sword path. As a vertical strike came down, he tilted his body to the right to dodge, moving like the wind. In a flash, he exploited Demichi's blind spot, slipped behind him, and launched an attack. Demichi, almost by instinct, heard the wind whistle and ducked. "Damn it, I should have been more careful of my back." Demichi hurriedly backed away and spun around to avoid losing sight of Simon for too long, but Simon lived up to his Class A reputation. Even his swordsmanship was quite refined. No sooner had Demichi turned around than he saw Simon thrusting his sword forward. Taking a deep breath, he arched his back, barely dodging the path. The blade just grazed over his head. Simon seemed not to have expected his opponent to dodge like that. His center of gravity shifted forward, causing him to lose his footing. Demichi seized this opportunity. He instantly knocked the weapon out of Simon's hand, ignored his own loss of balance as he fell toward the ground, then used the momentum to release his own weapon for a split second to spring back up. He caught his weapon again while Simon, left empty-handed, was finished. Demichi excitedly lunged toward Simon, but suddenly a sharp pain struck the back of his neck. Damn, that sensation felt so familiar. Simon's pupils glowed with a blue light, a sign that he was channeling his divine power. His gaze slowly dropped to the ground as Demichi collapsed. Earlier, Simon had used that power to control his own weapon. He had struck the back of Demichi's neck with it. The result was clear, and naturally the guy passed out. Simon immediately reached up to brush back his bangs. Sorry, but if this were a sparring match, you'd have won. But like I said, we're at war now. Simon fell silent, wondering, is Lee Han even stronger than this guy? The scene shifts back to the cave. Discovering Chosei lying unconscious in the cave, Lee Han rushed over in a panic to lift him up. Chosei, wake up, Chosei, Chosei. Chosei groggily came to, though his vision was blurred, because one of his eyes had been beaten until it was swollen shut. He said weakly, I'm not dead yet. Lee Han, stop shouting. A while later, Kudo returned to the cave with fish. Chosei ate his fill, regained his strength, and then Lee Han began to investigate. What happened after they left? Looking at Chosei, who was leaning against the wall, Lee Han asked in a low voice, Who did this to you? Chosei groaned slightly from the pain. He said, It was Kahine. His group has 7 people. They took all of our food. But he'll be back. We'd better change our hideout. Lee Han usually looked like a kind person, but in reality he wasn't just some innocent kid. Lee Han immediately shot down this suggestion. No, Chosei, no. I'm not gentle enough to let those bastards hurt my friend and get away with it. Amigo in Chosei's language meant friend. Hearing that, he let out a sigh of relief. But for now, let's find a hiding spot. Lee Han and Kudo quickly packed their things and helped Chosei leave the cave. We'll let them occupy this place for the time being. We'll ambush them at sunset. That evening, Lee Han and Kudo approached the cliff opposite the cave to scout. Firelight was spilling out from inside. There were 2 guards standing at the entrance. Lee Han whispered, They're using our cave as a hideout just like we planned. Kudo, start whenever you're ready. Kudo nodded and said, Yeah. Lee Han added, I couldn't do this alone, but together we can take those bastards down. Hearing this, Kudo slowly closed his eyes. He thought to himself, Lee Han is the only friend who trusts me. I will never let him down. He opened his eyes and divine power enveloped his body. Several stones were also caught in the aura and lifted into the air at Kudo's command. Kudo waved his hand forward and the stones flew out like bullets. Silent and swift, they ambushed the opponents. One guard was hit, causing his weapon to drop from his hand. The other guard turned around in a panic. Looking around to stay alert, he was hit by 2 more stones in his legs. Knowing he couldn't chase them down to see what was happening, he roared to alert everyone inside the cave. We're under attack! Hearing the noise, Kahine and the rest of them immediately rushed outside. The guard who had been hit in the legs was momentarily unable to stand. Damn it, he could only lie on the ground and point toward where the stones had come from to his accomplices. Damn it over there. Those guys were throwing stones while running and dodging. But how the hell are you going to run from me? Kudo thought. I can predict your trajectories. He then threw 4 more stones in succession and the group was left reeling. Panic began to set in. Lee Han seized this opportunity and darted out wielding his staff. With just a few moves, Lee Han took down the 3 men approaching him and Kudo. He frowned, his eyes blazing with rage. His staff hooked in a clean arc from bottom to top, striking the 4th guy who had rushed at him. The impact caused a nosebleed and the guy stumbled a bit. Then he fell to the ground, revealing the leader, Kahine. Kahine scowled, staring at Lee Han with undisguised hatred. Lee Han gripped his staff. He faced Kahine calmly. Every bit of trouble they had caused Lee Han's group over the past few days was etched in his mind. This was the time to settle all scores. A piece of wood grazed Kahine's cheek, drawing blood. His eyes locked onto Lee Han. Kahine reached up to wipe the blood from his face, then wondered Lee Han. Did he take down those 6 guys all by himself? No, that's impossible. You didn't come alone. Who is the other person? Lee Han laid it all out. You can come out now, Kudo. I can handle this part on my own. As soon as he saw Kudo, Kahine's eyes filled with undisguised hostility and resentment. We were defeated by these 2 weaklings, and one of them is even Kudo. Kahine glared at him and said, We're here to get revenge for Chosei. This isn't just some petty spat. So don't dream that I'll go easy on you. Ka reached down and picked up a wooden club that his crony had dropped. I've heard enough. Now we only use our true strength to settle this. Give it your best shot. Li Han raised his staff and channeled his divine power. Ka screamed and charged toward Li Han with all his fury and humiliation. One person who has now completely lost his sanity faces off against someone calmly confronting their enemy. Li Han watches his opponent's movements without even blinking. Then the moment Ka stepped into his striking range, Li Han lunged forward and slammed his staff right into the kid's head. Taking that hit, Ka stood stunned for a moment. It seemed he still couldn't believe his opponent had beaten him. Ignoring the bruise on his cheek, he scrambled back up to continue attacking Li Han, who simply ducked to dodge the blow. At the same time, his other hand swung the staff, striking Ka in the stomach. It felt as if his internal organs had been violently shaken, and Ka trembled, staring at the ground as sweat dripped down. His body shaking from the pain, Li Han stepped up beside him and coldly asked, "Does it hurt? Try to endure it. This is only just the beginning." Ka was so angry that he ignored the pain and picked up his weapon, shouting irritably, "Stop putting on an act!" But all he received in return were heavy, earth-shattering blows aimed at his body. Li Han, on the other hand, was completely unharmed, not even in the slightest. Ka could only receive the blows one-sidedly. This was no longer a normal duel. It was simply one person beating another. You can't call that a duel. Finally, the weapon in Ka's hand was knocked far away, and his body slid along the ground with countless injuries covering him. Even his head had been hit so many times that his mouth began to bleed. Looking at his wounds and feeling the dull ache throughout his body, Ka found it more and more impossible to believe. This is completely absurd. Just how strong is Li Han? Li Han locked his eyes on him and said, "He's hurt." You really had to beat him to that state just to be satisfied. Ka braced one hand on the ground, struggling to stand up. "Don't look down on me. How dare you look down on me?" His gaze now was no different from an unruly beast. Speaking a bit about his childhood before coming to the academy, Ka was a genius. As a famous German actor, his father had exploited Ka's fame to achieve his own political goals while gaining many other things in the process during this time. But that alone was not enough to satisfy his greed. He wanted more, much more. He had told him, "Once you become a Percy, this entire city will be ours. You must move forward, Ka, even if you have to harm others to do it." That is the reason he acts as poorly as he does now. Ka trembled as he stood up, his hand grabbing a handful of sand. He threw the sand at Li Han and screamed, "I won't let things end up like this. A bastard like you should stop what you're doing right now." Caught by surprise, Li Han couldn't dodge in time. His vision temporarily turned to darkness, and the gritty, uncomfortable sensation irritated his eyes, which Ka immediately took advantage of to lunge forward. He delivered a crushing punch to Li Han's face, sending him flying quite a distance. Gudo, seeing this, wanted to run over to catch him, but Li Han's collar was already grabbed by Ka. He even wanted to follow up with a few more blows to knock Li Han out completely. Upon hearing Gudo's voice, he immediately glared, his face turning dark as he ordered, "Don't come any closer." Gudo was too afraid to take another step and stood frozen. Meanwhile, Li Han was pelted with a series of punches to his stomach and chest. His small body trembled from time to time, but he absolutely refused to make a single sound. Gudo gritted his teeth, staring at the scene before him, his whole body shaking with fear. After feeling that was enough, Ka let go of Li Han, dropping him to the ground, then picked up another wooden stick and walked toward Gudo, saying, "I won't let anyone surpass me ever again." A stone flew up from the ground, aiming for Ka's face. Ka raised his hand to shield himself, and the stone struck his palm, turning it slightly red, which successfully enraged Ka. You. Gudo's entire body was covered in magical power. He held his hands out in front, both worried and determined to protect Li Han. Ka immediately closed in on Gudo, and because of that, Gudo got scared, and his magical power vanished. "Now even you want to climb all over me? I haven't liked you from the very beginning. How could a weakling like you stay at the academy?" Ka said, grabbing Gudo by the collar. "A low-life bastard like you should have been expelled a long time ago." It could be said that Ka had severely underestimated Li Han. He finished hitting him but didn't check on him, just leaving him there. The person who didn't know when he had sat back up, Li Han crept up behind Ka and punched him hard in the face, pouring all his anger from the last few days into it. This single punch from Li Han was so powerful it caused his nose and mouth to erupt in blood. Teeth and lips were a mess, and sand and dirt mixed into his mouth, feeling gritty and unpleasant. Li Han glared at him and said, "Do you think you're more useful than anyone else? Stop hiding behind your friends all the time. Look at Del Simon, Dimichi Jose, and even Gudo. Everyone is better than you. Right at this moment, Ka suddenly felt an indescribable fear surging in his mind. Li Han in front of him looked like a mountain that made people tremble with fear. There is always a higher mountain. What can you even do? You are absolutely nothing. Ka was thoroughly desperate. All his fighting spirit vanished, leaving only instinctive trembling. Li Han raised the pointed wooden stick in his hand, bringing it down straight at his opponent with a lethal strike, but not to kill him outright. He intentionally aimed slightly off, but it was enough to scare the life out of Ka. Li Han withdrew his weapon, turned his back on him, and said, "Everyone has a reason to become talented. If you want to keep moving forward, find another way. But touch my friends again and I won't let you off like I did today." Ka lay flat on the ground, staring up at the sky for a long time. He finally gave a self-deprecating smile. "Father, I never wanted to be a fallen in the first place." "Ha ha ha!" He chuckled awkwardly, and just like that, the long night came to an end. Later, a new announcement was made. Kael had voluntarily left Ark after fighting to avenge Trox, and naturally, Kudo and Li Han brought back news of their victory. The only casualty was that Li Han had to lean on Kudo just to make it back. The following 3 days on the deserted island passed quite quickly and smoothly. Finally, it was all over. Rescue helicopters filled the sky. The kids were secretly overjoyed. Even though they had survived the last 3 days well enough, they were all exhausted. Trox sighed and said, "I don't want to experience this ever again." Li Han agreed completely. But before they left, a group of other kids gathered around them, noisily saying thanks. "We were only able to survive because of you guys." They thanked and praised them so much that the two of them felt quite embarrassed. Trox scratched his thick, curly brown hair, pointed toward Li Han, and said, "The person you should be thanking most is Li Han over there. If it weren't for him..." Before he could finish, the instructor's announcement blared, cutting off their attention. "Survival training has concluded. Congratulations to everyone for successfully completing the mission over the past week." Dimichi, leaning against a tree near Simon, couldn't help but feel relieved upon hearing Sergeant Z's voice. It couldn't be denied that the past week had drained quite a bit of their energy. Sergeant Z added, "You will board the helicopters when you are called." This made Li Han feel a bit strange. Why, when called exactly? The helicopters were still hovering in the air. But there was a difference. Those helicopters already had other kids on board. Sergeant Z, with a stern and serious face, looked at the children being called to his helicopter. Del Simon, Dimichi Kudo, and Li Han were all the ones with exceptional performance. Over the past period, Z said, "After the voting results, you 4 are the only ones selected." The man squinted and said in a firm voice, "This is no longer just normal survival training. This is a test to see which of you is a rough diamond worthy of becoming a guardian of humanity. Kudo, Simon, Dimichi, and Li Han. You are the members being promoted to level 2. Naturally, Ark didn't just have training. There were other areas providing entertainment and sports for the level 1 kids. After finishing practice, Li Han was resting in his room when Trox came by and suggested, "Li Han, we're off today. Do you want to play soccer?" "Soccer?" Trox pointed to the ball in his hand and asked with a smile, "Do you know how to play?" Li Han nodded and replied, "I do." Then closed the book he was reading and set it aside. It was rare to have a break at Ark, so the kids chose to have some fun together. Trox, Li Han, and Kudo on one team. Trox asked the members excitedly, "No issues with that, right? Then let's get started." On the opposite side were Dimichi and Simon. Dimichi looked at Simon and warned him beforehand, "No using psychic power, okay?" Simon sighed and said, "I know. That guy really holds a grudge, doesn't he?" At Ark, they only granted leave for important matters, and today, because all the instructors for level 1 were in a meeting to evaluate the promotions to level 2. They were off. In the meeting room, all the level 1 instructors were gathered. Everyone looked serious. After confirming that everyone had arrived, the base commander, Alexander Zeko, signaled for everyone to begin the meeting. In the distance, GZ, the head of Research Lab 2, adjusted his glasses and opened the discussion. "There are 4 spots this time. What about the children?" "There's Del Simon and Dimichi. They lack nothing for promotion. They actually exceed the standards. As for the other 2 first, there's Li Han, since enrollment until now. His psychic power has always been at the lowest level. If not for the special treatment from Sergeant Z, he would still be in Class D. But now he's been chosen as a candidate for level 2. Why would you promote a child like that?" Alexander Zeko looked toward Wei Tran and Z, demanding, "Explain your reasoning." Wei Tran calmly said, "I'm sure you've seen it. Since the accident with Sergeant Z, Lee Han has shown exceptional weapon skills. With his patience and willpower, the boy has everything a soldier needs. Alexander Zico replied with an expressionless face. Praising him like that doesn't sound like you at all, Waitron. Jack, hearing this, thought to himself, if I don't praise him, how else would you promote him? You wouldn't. Then he added, besides his potential, Lee Han's teleportation skills are also quite clever. Come to think of it, it seems he uses it in combination with a spin to make his attacks more powerful. It's even more impressive that he came up with those ideas himself, without anyone having to teach him. As he said this, Lee Han, out on the soccer field, successfully scored a goal against the opposing team with overwhelming force. Alexander Zico seemed to have somewhat accepted this reasoning, but externally he remained expressionless and just signaled for them to continue to the second person. Outside, after Lee Han scored, Trox immediately rushed over to throw an arm around his shoulder and praise him. Hey, you bastard! You said you'd never played before, but you're actually pretty good. Meanwhile, on the other side of the field, Demichi and Simon are at it again, arguing about how their famous older brother is so good at soccer. What does that have to do with me? How are you this clueless? As the two of them bickered intensely, things were just as tense in the room far away, where GZ slammed his hand onto the documents and shouted, Are you kidding me? Psychological sensitivity right after leveling up. During the psychological transformation surgery, the most important thing is mental fortitude. Saying that to me is basically, are you telling me to kill that kid? Z replied calmly. Kujo's psychological progress is the best. He's far ahead of those other geniuses, plus his ability to predict the near future is vital to our strategy. Alexander Recco frowned slightly and said, but the problem is still his mental state. Z replied, that's why Lee Han needs to level up too. Kujo's mental state is heavily influenced by Lee Han. Right now, Lee Han is basically acting like a big brother to him. After hearing that, Alexander Recco took off his glasses, massaged the bridge of his nose, and sighed. It's Lee Han again, huh? It seems like you two really want Lee Han to level up, don't you? Nguitron and Z both fell silent, not saying a word, but their attitude made it perfectly clear. They really wanted Lee Han to level up. Out on the field, the kids were still playing soccer hard. Lee Han received a pass and coordinated perfectly with Chose. Chose made a short pass, preventing the opponents from stealing the ball. After receiving the ball from Lee Han, Chose dribbled skillfully, weaving through the guys, blocking him, moving so fast he left them in the dust. In front of the goal, the goalkeeper held his hands up, looking at Chose with caution and anxiety. Just before catching the ball, Chose frowned slightly at the obstacle in front of him. They were all crowded there to defend. Getting past both Simon and Demichi would definitely take a lot of time, but dribbling past them wasn't the only option. Without even looking back, Chose just tapped a horizontal pass. Lee Han ran up from behind, caught it, and the ball went straight into the goal. Simon and Demichi hadn't even had time to react before a brief celebration broke out on the pitch. Chose walked over to high-five Lee Han. Nice work, Lee Han. Lee Han laughed. We make a good team, huh? Just then, a familiar shadow appeared before them, telling them to stop playing, because the promotion evaluation was over, and they would be receiving the announcement soon. Sergeant Z looked around the field and said, but since you're all gathered here, I'll announce the results now. The announcement was made as Demichi and Simon were grabbing each other's collars, temporarily calling a truce. There were 4 people promoted this time, including Demichi, Simon, Kujo, and Lee Han. Demichi whistled. Simon acted like it was a given with no real expression, while Kujo still looked a bit timid and anxious, and Lee Han felt a bit of disbelief. You know your own abilities well compared to the other 4. You're nowhere near qualified to level up, but Sergeant Z's announcement was final. Seeing this, Chose walked over, put a hand on Lee Han's shoulder, and smiled. What's wrong, Lee Han? Congrats on the promotion. Make sure you save a spot for me, Chose said with a smile. Thanks to Chose's attitude, Lee Han felt much calmer. He nodded and said with genuine sincerity, Yeah, I'll see you later, Chose. See you later. The 2 kids shook hands. Sergeant Z stepped closer, let out a sigh, and said, Head back to the dormitory. Those who were promoted, gather your things and meet up. The kids left one by one, but Lee Han lingered, looking at Z and saying, Thank you, sir, for the leveling evaluation and the Class D selection today. I believe it's all thanks to you. Sergeant Z pulled out a cigarette and said, I'm not sure you'll want to thank me later. You can't give up from here on out. If you make it through level 2, we'll meet again. Try to survive, Lee Han. Lee Han stood at attention and saluted Z. Z took a long drag of his cigarette and turned his back on the boy to walk away. As the sunset stained the sky, the 4 children selected for promotion gathered at the agreed-upon spot. Demichi was as noisy as ever. He grinned and said, "All right, let's go, gentlemen." Simon, standing nearby, was full of things he wanted to say, but in the end he kept them to himself. Lee Han nodded and asked, "Yeah, we're heading to Zone 2, right?" Kujo instinctively gripped his bag tightly, trembling with fear. Tears welled up uncontrollably, but Lee Han gently placed a hand on his shoulder and smiled. Comforting him, Kujo looked at his friend and called his name. Lee Han smiled and said, "Don't worry, we're going together." Kudo instinctively gripped his backpack tight, trembling uncontrollably in fear as tears began to stream down his face, but Lee Han just gently placed a hand on his shoulder and smiled. Reassuring him, the terrified Kudo looked toward his friend and called out his name, Lee Han, and he laughed, saying, "Don't worry, we're in this together." Kudo's face turned deathly pale, and he stammered, "But I'm scared we have to go through surgery to become adults." Demichi burst out laughing upon hearing this and shouted, "What's there to be afraid of? Let's just go." Simon asked helplessly, "Why are you so excited?" Demichi laughed and replied, "We'll be way stronger than we are now." Father was in Sector 2. Once they arrived, they were greeted and led into the doctor's private research lab. From a distance, Shasha GZ looked at the 4 children and said, "Hello, everyone. For the next 5 weeks, I will be the one taking care of you. My name is Shasha GZ." After 5 weeks, Lee Han asked curiously, and Shasha GZ nodded, saying, "Yes. It will take 5 weeks for your bodies to mature into adulthood. The first 2 weeks will be spent in incubation pods, and the following 3 weeks will be recovery and training." But their gazes were fixed on the pods. Behind Shasha GZ, they muttered, 2 weeks, inside that machine." They were all, to some extent, feeling a bit afraid. Lee Han remained silent, instinctively adjusting the strap of his bag. He couldn't deny that he was scared too, but he quickly regained his composure. He held out his left hand and said, "See you all in 2 weeks." Hearing this from Lee Han, the others felt a sense of calm wash over them. That's right, there's nothing dangerous about it. They'll just see each other again in 2 weeks. Demichi and Kudo immediately reached out their hands to both sides of Lee Han. Seeing this, Shasha GZ couldn't help but be surprised, even though she had expected a little something. "I have to say, this kid is truly incredible. The one highly recommended by Sergeant Z, his mental fortitude is definitely the strongest among his peers." 1 week before the experiment began, there were people monitoring every development at their location at all times. After the 4 children stripped down, they stepped into the containment pods. A blue viscous chemical liquid slowly began to pump in. They realized this chemical could enhance their bodies, so it made their skin crawl a little. Naturally, with their whole bodies covered in this fluid, they were each provided with a mask. It was for breathing oxygen, but while still alive, the air supply like this felt extremely limited. Shasha frowned, secretly thinking, consumed by fear. "Every child who goes through this stage is the same. I'm sorry. Please just hang in there a little longer. You'll fall unconscious soon." Then she told her assistant to prepare the needles and surgical tools. As the children began to drift into unconsciousness, time slowly ticked by. The liquid in the tanks shifted from a greenish hue to a deep blue. Shasha GZ stood before the status monitor, her heart filled with anxiety. It had already been a week. Thankfully, nothing has happened. Today's procedure will be their most critical moment. She then found herself wondering, must humanity really go this far just to be worthy of survival? It was truly ironic. She couldn't help but feel exhausted and unsettled. They were just 10-year-old children. Seeing her expression, Dowena asked with concern, "Dr. GZ, are you tired? Please go and take a break." Shasha GZ seemed to realize she needed some rest, so she decided to step out for a moment, leaving the lab to Dowena. Her eyes landed on a familiar figure. Sitting in the waiting room was Sergeant Z. "You said you didn't like kids, right? Why do you keep coming to my lab every single time?" Ez leaned back against the chair and laughed, saying, "To make sure the doctor doesn't break my property, or kill them." Shasha gritted her teeth, her face showing clear irritation. This guy really had a way with words that made everyone around him sick of him. She plopped down onto the sofa and said, "There won't be any problems." She pulled out a cigarette for herself. "We are currently in the middle of the second stage, injecting the second culture fluid. The second culture fluid contained the core of a dragon's soul, a concentrated liquid used to dilute dragon hearts." Z took a drag of his cigarette and thought, if the kids are forced to resonate with the dragon core, they'll find it easier to use dragon spirit power. Perhaps Lai Han will also be able to... Suddenly, the communication watch on Sasha GZ's wrist emitted a notification sound. A new message arrived. It was an emergency alert. Sasha rushed back to the lab, praying in her heart that the situation wasn't too dire. Z also hurried to follow her. Sasha breathlessly pushed the door open, not even stopping to catch her breath, and asked, "What happened?" Inside, his containment pod air was constantly escaping from Lai Han's mouth. His expression was filled with pain. Duwena looked at the status screen, which had turned red, and there was a giant triangle flashing in the center. She said in a panic, "Lai Han's consciousness, it's returned. He's in a lot of pain right now." Sasha was so panicked she was stuttering. She reached out toward the emergency device, wanting to manually shut it off. But before she could touch the device, another hand reached out and stopped her. Sasha looked to her side in shock. It was Sergeant Z. But she didn't understand why he was stopping her. "Isn't this to save Li Han's life, Doctor?" "Doctor?" He frowned and said, "You can't turn it off, Doctor. No matter what, the boy has to reach level 2 no matter the cost." Time slowly drifted by. The surgery ended. As time slowly ticked by, the surgery finally came to an end. Li Han has now successfully grown into a young man with a normal physique. Sitting in the office, Sasa GR rests her chin on her hand, looking at him from across the room, and asks with a smile, "How are you feeling?" Li Han smiles honestly and says that thanks to her he feels very healthy. Sa Se GR drops her smile and says sternly, "There has never been a case like yours before." This is the first time we've seen a psych case successfully resist mental force like that. It's truly astonishing. Flashback to that moment. After hearing Sergeant Z insist that Li Han must be leveled up at any cost, Sa had screamed, "Are you crazy? If this continues, the kid will die. I have to stop the glass chamber right now." SAGR was so panicked that tears wouldn't stop falling. She just wanted to save the child from the unbearable pain, but Sergeant Z coldly said, "Li Han, he is not someone who will be defined by his own mental power. Continue the process, Doctor, but stop the mental resonance. If it's that kid, he'll be able to pull through." Every time she remembers that moment, Sasa still feels shaken and worried. She lets out a breath and says, "You are the only unique case that developed only physical strength. Do you feel any discomfort? Like feeling a disconnection in your body, for example, or anything else?" Li Han calmly smiles, cutting off Sasa's worries. "I actually feel just fine. Besides, there's one thing I'm less worried about now. At least I won't be kicked out." When Sasa hears this, she feels a sense of admiration for Li Han. The boy's mental fortitude is truly solid. She guesses that he must be the trainee Sergeant Z praised for having a stronger mindset than the others. But this only makes Sasa feel even more curious. Because mental power is directly connected to their psyche, so why would a kid with such a strong mentality have such low mental power? However, she doesn't press Li Han with any more questions. She just organizes the files and signals that he is free to leave. On the other hand, she has a few hunches that Li Han's mentality might have something to do with blocking the development of his mental power, but that's just a guess. Just as he steps outside, Li Han meets his old friend Demichi. He has become quite tall and still carries that familiar nonchalant attitude. Demichi raises his hand to greet him and says with a grin, "I'm here to see you, Li Han. From today on, we're moving up to level 2. Li Han looks behind Demichi, where Simon is still standing with his signature grumpy expression, looking annoyed at the whole world. Looking at them, Li Han smiles and says, 5 long weeks, they passed by so fast. Everyone has changed so much, especially you, Kudo." Li Han points at the teenager standing next to Demichi. Kudo is now noticeably taller, his skin is still a bit tanned, and his once curly black hair has turned white. He is completely different from the Kudo they knew before. Hearing Li Han's compliment, Kudo scratches his head and gives a shy smile. Li Han looks at the three of them and expresses his joy from the bottom of his heart. "I'm just glad everyone survived." Simon grumpily says, "What do you mean, luck? It was a given. Stop being arrogant and acting like you're the leader, Li Han," Simon says, before turning sharply and walking away. Demichi shrugs, shaking his head and sighing. Going through puberty for sure. After the 5-week period, Li Han and his group are transferred to the level 2 dormitory. From the outside, it doesn't look much different from level 1. But from level 2 onwards, you start training in teams, with each team having about 4 to 10 members. There are currently 12 level 2 teams. Li Han enters his room with Kudo's room right next door. He steps inside and looks around, finding it surprising to have a private room like this. Back to team combat. Li Han and Kudo are assigned to Team 7. The leader of Team 7 is Kato Soki. Currently, they are gathered in an arena. To train for level 2, there are many complex things they have to master. But generally, it can be divided into 3 main categories: specialized firearms, combat machines, and sparring. Do you understand? We have to learn how to shoot those specialized guns right. Kadosoki smiles and says. Lee Han replies, we were taught that modern weapons can still counter the minions. Yes, that's right. After nodding, Kato explains, the minions we've known so far have had low intelligence like goblins, wild boars, or werewolves. Later on, more intelligent species appeared. They are called enlos, who act as commanders for the mid-level troops. Those enlo bastards can even use mental power. If the enlos use mental power, doesn't that mean physical weapons won't work on them? Lee Han asks. Good question. That's right. They aren't affected by physical weapons, but their mental power also has limits, just like dragons. Our goal is to wait for the moment they run out of energy. Just like training with rifles, combat machines, and sparring are equally important. That is the competitive combat method between teams. Sparring sessions will be held in artificial forests through small-scale combat training fields. The main event is Capture the Flag, which means stealing the flag at the opponent's base. It requires teams to build strategies and focus on the individual strengths of each member. But this is a very dangerous form of training because even without a sharpened blade, steel weapons can still cause very serious injuries, and for combat machines, well, it's about learning how to use them. Hoverboarding is the easiest one because all you have to do is knock your opponent down. But you guys always need someone to support the team from behind, supporting them while they maneuver countless different hoverboards to help their teammates move in rare situations. The supporter also has to use their board to attack opponents. Until now, we haven't had a player strong enough to support the team, but now that you're here, we don't have to worry about that anymore. Kudo, hearing this, gulped nervously. The tension was clear on his face as Kato smiled and asked, You can do it right. Kudo stuttered, looking uneasy. About that? Kudo's attitude made Brian, who had been silent behind Kato the whole time, lose his cool. He stepped forward and demanded, Can't you give a straight answer? We aren't asking for your opinion. Once you're on a team, you have to carry the position you've been assigned, Lee Han said, stepping forward to intervene. Kudo, if it's you, you can definitely do it. But he's not the type to perform well when pressured. Before Lee Han could even finish, Brian lunged forward, getting right in his face. He growled, Shut your mouth, newbie. What do you know? Kato finally stepped in to stop Brian. Brian huffed and backed off. Stop it. Lee Han has a point. Today is only his first day. They still have a lot to learn, and Lee Han, even though we're both level 2, everyone here, is a senior with more experience than you. Watch your attitude, okay? The others stepped behind Lee Han, glaring at him. Kadosoki smiled, narrowing his purple eyes. He smirked and said, You're only here because I wanted Kudo on the roster. You two are basically a bundle deal. Buy one, get one free. I don't expect much from someone with low-level mental energy like you. Just try not to be a burden. The guys in Team 7 started laughing at him. But did they think Lee Han would get angry or something? Not at all. He kept his cool and responded to them with sincerity. Lee Han held out his hand and smiled. I understand. I'll do my best not to get in your way, team leader Kato. Kato looked visibly annoyed. His smile vanished. He awkwardly reached out and shook Lee Han's hand. That was the first story that unfolded after Lee Han reached level 2. The drama from Team 7 continued. Kadosoki stared at Lee Han, secretly holding a grudge. Arrogant brat. Let's see how long you can keep that up. Lee Han thought to himself, I'll show you exactly how much I can handle. After a grueling day of training, Lee Han returned to his dorm to rest. He stepped into the bathroom, turned on the shower, and let the hot water wash over him while he reflected on the day. It happened this afternoon during an exercise. Lee Han and the others, wearing tactical gear, lay flat on the ground with live fire guns in their hands. With every shot fired, his body twitched slightly. Kato, of course, took on the role of the instructor observing the situation. After finishing the session, Lee Han stood up. Together with the others, he began the run-and-gun training drill facing off against dummy targets. After completing his turn, Lee Han snuck a glance at Kato's group. He felt the result wasn't bad at all. Surely Kato couldn't call him a dead weight to the team anymore. But just as he turned to look at Kato behind him, Lee Han realized Kato was looking at him too. But Kato immediately acted natural, snapped his head in another direction, and started scolding Kudo. Kudo, suddenly being yelled at, panicked and became even more clumsy. Kato gritted his teeth, frowned, and adjusted his hat. Damn it, what a mess! What happened next was him walking over to Kudo to fix him. Lee Han wondered, was Kudo really not good enough to be acknowledged? He truly didn't understand. Lee Han felt that Kudo had actually done a great job. The bathroom door opened and a thick cloud of steam billowed out. Lee Han wiped his hair, his body chiseled with muscles that gym-goers would dream of with droplets of water still rolling down. Earlier, Kato had handed down the news that he would be relegated to the reserve position. Under the gaze of many, Kato casually laughed and said, "There are too many members in our team practice. We have to cut the numbers down to make it fit. Our team has a lot of people and there are already plenty of melee fighters like you." He then stood up and patted Lee Han on the shoulder. "Everyone at level 2 is allowed to watch the team sparring at the training center, so don't be too sad. You'll still get to watch." Which meant, in all likelihood, for his whole life, he could only be a reserve player. That couldn't happen. Lee Han looked at the photo the captain had sent him. He picked up his watch, put it on, and whispered to himself, "It's fine. Everything is going according to plan." Another day came. Today was the capture the flag match between Team 3 and Team 9. The guys from Team 7 came to watch as well. Kato laughed. "Team 3 has some new faces, so keep an eye on them and carefully analyze their tactics." Lee Han heard this and made a guess. "New faces in Team 3, huh?" He looked up at the screen. "Is he talking about Del Simon?" After the battle started, the level 2 students were confused and noisy watching how Del Simon led his team. He looked so reckless. On the Team 9 side, the people facing Del Simon were a bit terrified and anxious. Are those maniacs out of their minds? Have all members attack like this? But the members of Team 3 just smirked, full of arrogance, saying, "With an invincible Esper on our side, we'll wipe you guys out easily and take back all the flags." No sooner had they finished speaking than divine energy engulfed Del Simon's body. Seeing this, the members of Team 9 panicked and rushed forward, shouting, "Stop standing there like fools! Take him down before he uses his Esper ability!" But before they could even reach him, the weapons in their hands were seized by some invisible force. Del Simon had disarmed them all. His eyes glowed and the steel swords were left hovering in midair. The members of Team 9 just gaped, tilting their heads back to look at their own swords, thinking, how could he do something like this? Simon lowered his hand and the swords he was controlling plunged down like rain, piercing the members of Team 9. The whole group struggled desperately. As they dodged their own weapons, the rest of Team 3 seized the opportunity. They charged at Team 9 to launch their attack. The divine energy around Simon had faded a little. He calmly observed the situation before him. As was to be expected, the members of Team 9, having no weapons in their hands, were easily taken down by Team 3. They had captured the flags as well. Everything was crystal clear now. This group was clearly strong enough to win. After watching, Kato turned back and pinned his hopes on Kuro, thinking about how important it is to have a talented Esper in a match. It really matters a lot, you know. The strategy I've come up with is pretty much the same. We can do it because we have Kuro now. But Kuro felt even more anxious and insecure, believing he couldn't do what Simon just did. Lee Han, after hearing his plan, immediately spoke up to oppose it. "Captain, I have a different opinion. Team 9 didn't use any tactics at all. They didn't take advantage of the terrain. They only attacked with individual ability and strength." Lee Han hadn't even finished his next sentence before he had to stop himself because Kato's face was darker than the bottom of a pot. He snapped, "If what, go on? If you were the captain, is that what you were going to say?" Lee Han looked at the person in front of him, then at the expressions of those around him. It was dead silent. He suddenly realized something. Now I get it. The reason people hate me so much isn't because I'm weak. Suddenly, Brian called out to Lee Han. Lee Han looked over and saw him signaling to leave the crowd and talk in private. The two of them slowly withdrew from the crowd to a secluded spot. Brian got straight to the point. "I admit you're very strong, Lee Han. Kato and I have always recognized that, but you really don't fit in Team 7. Every member of the team feels the same." Upon hearing this, Lee Han suddenly understood, so that's why Kato was watching him. He calmly asked, "Brian, why do you think I don't fit in Team 7? Brian said, "You aren't afraid to speak up and go against Kato's thoughts and orders during training, even if I agree that your ideas are actually better. But Team 7 only needs one leader. If there's someone in the team who doubts and opposes Kato, the whole team will be divided. As long as Kato is the captain, you definitely won't be able to participate in practice matches. Submit a transfer request to another team at an appropriate time." Lee Han half closed his eyes and muttered, "So that's how it is." After saying that, Brian walked away. Lee Han returned to his dormitory thinking, now I understand. A captain needs the trust of all his team members, and I've threatened his position. Lee Han muttered, a transfer request, huh? That afternoon in the instructor's work area, Lee Han sought out someone very familiar to him to ask for advice, Coach Wei Chen. Wei Chen looked at the form he was reading, then at Lee Han, unable to hide his confusion and surprise. He stared at the paper for a long time before asking, Lee Han, is this for real? Lee Han smiled and immediately replied, yes, sir. Wei Chen brought his hand up to rub his forehead. I see. However, the second-year professors have to discuss this first. It'll probably take a while. Overall, everything had been temporarily arranged. Lee Han sat on his bed and thought to himself, good. I needed to do this anyway, so it works out for me. I can focus on training my own abilities since I don't have to worry about practice matches anymore. While waiting, I can analyze all the matches of my teammates to come up with my own strategy. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Lee Han called out, come in, Kuro. The door opened. Kuro walked into the room and sat down next to Lee Han. What did you say to the vice captain earlier? Lee Han shook his head and said, nothing much. How are you preparing for tomorrow's match? Kuro said, I can control 4 flying boards at the same time now. Without anyone on them. No, even with people on them. Lee Han was surprised and asked, really? It seems like your psychic abilities are growing really fast. I think you could become one of the strongest level 2 psychics out there. Kuro shyly scratched his cheek. He still wasn't confident, and Lee Han could see that. She smiled and said, don't worry, Kuro, I'll be rooting for you. Kuro smiled and nodded. Just like always, Lee Han knew how to put him at ease. The next match was Team 7's turn. The new guy, Kuro, was drawing a lot of attention. They say he's really strong, and people were curious to see what kind of power he'd show off. Leah looked up at the screen to watch the battle, expecting a lot from Kuro's performance today. Inside the arena, members of both teams stood on high platforms on opposite sides. Below were several poles driven deep into the ground and a net to ensure safety. Kato led his team forward and said, all right, let's move out. Make sure to help us out, Kuro. Kuro gave a slight nod. The inter-team match between Team 1 and Team 7, the aerial battle, was about to begin. The kids standing next to Lee Han were all excitedly chatting, while he on his own began to analyze the competition. The core of these aerial matches is the flight board. Most dragons can fly, so they are required to fight in the air. Besides parachutes and grappling hooks, flight boards are used. They are a type of automated drone. They act as platforms mid-air, and some military-grade ones can even fire projectiles. In aerial matches, usually one person controls 2 flight boards either for movement or as weapons against opponents. The most important position in an aerial match is the support role. Their job is to control multiple boards simultaneously from the back to minimize the mental strain on their teammates. That position suits Kuro since he can control 4 at once. Back inside the arena, Kato signaled his team to start fighting. As long as we stick to the strategy, we'll definitely win, Brian said, leading the charge. The group jumped onto their boards, shouting as they charged forward. Team 1 moved into position as well, leaping onto their own boards and rushing ahead. With fierce looks on their faces, Team 1 slowly advanced together. Brian thought to himself, just as Kato predicted, Team 1 is still overconfident. They assumed that no matter how strong a rookie might be, they could still take him down. As they were rushing forward, Team 1 suddenly split into 2 groups to attack from both sides, but as soon as they broke away, they saw Brian's massive frame blocking their path. He raised his sword, leaped into the sky, and swung down with a powerful vertical slash, knocking the Team 1 member off their board. They were instantly eliminated just minutes into the match. Meanwhile, the other side of the split group also got caught by Kato and was knocked out. They didn't even know how they'd been taken out so quickly. Looking at the fallen opponent, Kato smiled and nodded. Good, just according to plan. Outside, the crowd exploded. What they took out 2 people as soon as it started. Is Team 7 always this strong? It's like they knew exactly what the opponents were going to do next. That's to be expected. Because this plan centers on Kuro, Kato explained. Team 1 doesn't have a support role, so each person has to pilot their own board. Since Kuro can control 4 at once, he'll be handling the boards for the vice captain and myself. And since he has the ability to see the near future, he's maneuvering the boards after predicting their moves. Kuro nervously nodded. Got it. Brian grunted and said, I get it now. Because our close combat skills are top tier, you're saying we should focus on that. And take them all down, right? Kato laughed happily. Exactly. Back in the present, Li Han somewhat acknowledged that Kato's plan was working at least for now, but the opponents would figure it out soon enough. Meanwhile, the rest of Team 7 was basking in their victory. Everything seemed too easy, and they didn't notice that Kuro, while piloting the flight boards and using his powers, was becoming exhausted. His hands were shaking and sweat was dripping down uncontrollably. He was completely drained from the fatigue and the heavy pressure weighing on him. "I can't mess this up or everyone will lose because of me." Kuro's mind was flooded with images of his teammates. The battle was getting intense, but Team 1 wasn't going to be a pushover. They managed to take down one guy from Team 7, but it took way too much time and effort. Are these bastards always this tough? I can't believe it's down to just the two of us while they still have 5 people left, including their support. Their eyes locked onto Kuro. He's standing behind the other 4. If we don't take out the support, Kuro quickly assessed the situation and whispered to his teammate, "I'm starting the plan." Colum gave a quick nod, then blurred forward. Kuro kept his eyes locked on him, trying to predict his next move. Philip gripped his sword and let out a loud shout as he charged. Kato scrambled to intercept him. "He's coming. Is this going to be a one-on-one?" Suddenly, Philip leaped into the air, and Colum, who had been behind him, charged forward, arms wide, to pin down Brian and Kato at the same time. "Don't let Philip through!" Kuro, Kato, and Brian were locked onto their opponents. They desperately wanted to rush back to help, but there was no way out. Only now did they realize they'd been trapped. "Stop that bastard!" Kato screamed, but the other 2 were no match for Philip. He easily evaded their attacks and continued his charge toward Kuro. Kato finally turned and shouted to his teammate, who wasn't pinned down, "Don't chase him! Get over here! This jerk is trying to take me down with him." She gritted her teeth, face contorted from the strain as sweat poured down her brow. Li Han frowned at the sight. No, they should have run back to protect Kuro. If Kuro got separated from them, he remembered when the plan was first drawn up. There were always 2 hoverboards, 4 and 8, behind Kuro. But right now, Kuro was facing Philip all alone. His heart pounded in his chest as he remembered the hoverboards he was assigned. He frantically took control, sending the 2 boards flying from the sky toward Philip. They were just inches away when Philip raised his sword to strike. Colum took a hit from Team 7 and couldn't hold on any longer, falling to the ground. Kato and Brian broke free from the struggle, but then they panicked, looking back. What about the back? Behind them, Kuro had already been completely defeated. He had no way to defend against Philip. The individual strength of Team 1 was just too much. Philip looked up, locking eyes with the other 3. Then he slowly flashed a winning smile. Kuro lost control of the hoverboards, and Kato and Brian immediately dropped to the ground. Kuro had passed out. In the end, it really did become a one-on-one. The crowd outside was buzzing. "Looks like Kuro controls their hoverboards, right? Still, their defense is way too weak." Li Han watched the screen. Just as he suspected, that was bound to happen. Kato's strategy relied heavily on Kuro's exceptional mental power, especially the moment Philip got close to him. He was still trying to control those 2 boards to attack. Just as Philip was about to swing his sword, a noise erupted behind him. He froze and turned his head. It turned out that because of his sheer panic and anxiety, Kuro had accidentally crashed the 2 boards into each other, shattering them. Philip looked at the wreckage on the ground while Kuro grew even more frantic and terrified. Fumbling and shaking, Kuro couldn't pull himself together. Philip exhaled a breath and laughed. Too bad. Kuro must have been under immense pressure, and he finally cracked. In the end, Team 1 won. Li Han frowned. "I wouldn't have left Kuro alone if I were the leader." 3 weeks later, Li Han was called into Nguitron's office for a private chat. Nguitron held their application form in his hand. He said, "Li Han, let's talk about the request you submitted." The result was an approval to form his own team. Li Han swallowed hard, his heart racing. It was actually approved, Nguitron continued. "Because your leadership assessment was excellent at level 1, all the instructors agreed to give you a chance. I think they want to test your reputation and team. And your ingenuity." Li Han took the paper from Nguitron's hand. On it, the conditions for forming a team were listed. There had to be more than 4 members, including the leader. You have the right to nominate 1 member from any existing team unless they refuse. As soon as Li Han read that part, he grew worried. If I follow these conditions, the other team leaders will hate me since they've already prepared to keep their core members. Li Han smiled and asked, "You're saying I should do what I can, right?" Nguitron laughed at that. "You're still as sharp as ever, Li Han. I have high expectations for you." Li Han left Nguitron's office with his head bowed, thinking to himself, The first members I want for my team are those two Kuro and Chosei. But as soon as he thought of it, he felt discouraged. But Chosei isn't here. Well, I'll start by talking to Kuro. Lee Han sighed and slumped his shoulders. Suddenly he stopped and his eyes lit up. Right, there's one more person. Lee Han quickly made his way to his old friend's dorm. He knocked on the door and the person inside opened it immediately. It was Demichi. Demichi was still sweating, looking like he had been working out as usual. What's up, Lee Han? A few days passed and Team 7 went through a few more matches, struggling more or less. Kato sighed, rubbing his forehead and grumbling. Our ranking keeps dropping because of Kuro. We should have tried harder to get Simon on our team. Kato nodded in agreement. Yeah, Simon is truly gifted. Both his combat skills and his mental power are exceptional, so he can take on 2 or 3 people at once. Kuro can't do anything on his own. His stats were just a lie all along. The two of them kept talking like that, unaware that Lee Han was standing in a hidden corner nearby. He happened to overhear their entire conversation. I don't have anyone else to take his place, so just let him in. The flashback ended. Currently, Lee Han is in Demichi's room laying out his intentions. Demichi laughs and asks, Are you planning to form a new team? Who else are you planning to recruit besides me? Lee Han replied. Kuro, I started this with the thought that Kuro would definitely join my team. Hearing this, Demichi laughed and said, no team leader is going to let you take their members that easily. Lee Han replied, But Demichi, you still haven't answered me. Demichi scratched his buzz-cut head and said, Well, I'm very grateful for the invitation. To answer you, no. Lee Han, I'm the next captain of this team. I can't abandon them now. Lee Han's eyes widened in surprise, but he quickly calmed down. Given Demichi's abilities, it wasn't hard to understand. Lee Han nodded slightly and said, I understand. Demichi looked at Lee Han, feeling a bit guilty and sheepish inside. He rubbed his neck, looked away, and hesitated before adding, Besides, I want to be your rival. That's way more fun than being a member of your team, he said, grinning. Lee Han offered a helpless smile that was Demichi for you. He stepped forward, tapped Demichi lightly on the chest, and said, Don't come crying to me when you're my rival and I beat you to a pulp. Next time I'll break both of your arms. Lee Han left Demichi's room. On his way out, the people from the second tier all looked at him with judgmental, scrutinizing eyes, whispering, That's Lee Han. He really wants to be a team leader that badly. What an arrogant jerk. Lee Han walked past them nonchalantly, thinking to himself, Think whatever you want, I already expected this anyway. When the second-tier group heard the news that he was forming a new team, all the captains glared at him, especially Kato, whose face darkened and twisted as he came to find him. Lee Han, is this how you stab me in the back? I don't care if you leave my team or start a new one, but I won't let you have Kuro. Kuro stood behind them as usual, looking away, still timid, unable to be honest with himself, or those who are good to him. Lee Han didn't force it immediately, just calmly said, Kuro won't be able to show his full potential. Under your guidance. Kato scowled, pointing at Kuro and saying, Don't act like you know anything. Kuro will continue to be a core member of Team 7. Lee Han replied, If a war broke out right now, would you tell the enemy to wait too? I am certain I can tap into his full potential immediately. A commander must win regardless of manpower limitations. No matter who you blame, it won't change the outcome. Kato was so angry his face distorted and his veins popped. He lunged forward, grabbed Lee Han by the collar and shouted in his face, You bastard! No matter what you say, I'm not giving Kuro to you. Lee Han coldly replied, That's not your decision to make, that's Kuro's decision. As he finished, Kato whipped around to look at him. Lee Han also turned to look at the boy. Kato darkened his expression and threatened Kuro, If you go, I'll kill you. Kuro jumped in fear, looking at him terrified. Lee Han calmly asked, Do you really think you can do that? You're all talk. You talk so much that if you fell into the water, your mouth would be the only thing left floating. Kato couldn't take it anymore and swung his hand, punching Lee Han hard in the face. But Lee Han didn't even dodge. Kato stood there with his jaw dropped, staring at Lee Han sitting on the ground, a sense of fear arising in him because everyone here knew the guy had lost his temper. That was why he hit someone. Lee Han got up from the ground, wiped the wound on his face, and said, I'll let that slide, Kato. This isn't worth me slowing down. Having said that, he stood up and calmly walked away. Kato stood silently behind him. As he passed, Kuro Lee Han didn't even lower his voice, saying, I'll be waiting for you. Kuro watched him leave. Others continued to gossip, What a fool. Who would leave their own team to follow a leader who hasn't proven their strength yet? Who knows how they'll treat him? What if the team formation fails? He'll just be left all alone. Kuro trembled in fear once again facing mental pressure. I've already asked everyone I could think of. But the situation wasn't looking very good. Lee Han fell into deep thought, wondering what he should do next if things kept going like this. Because he was so focused on his thoughts, he bumped into a person wearing a skull mask passing by dressed in a mysterious full-body cloak. Lee Han hadn't even had a chance to apologize before the person was already a distance away. He's so fast, but no. The most important thing is he actually allowed to dress like that? You're not like the others at all. Still keeping an eye on that weirdo over there. Just then his watch pinged a message from the instructor saying all team captains needed to assemble in front of Building 2. A few people were already gathered there. The doctor was right in the middle. She walked between 2 rows of people and announced, "These 6 have just leveled up and are waiting for team assignments. We've decided to let the new captains pick first." Lee Han stepped forward. Hearing that he was secretly thrilled, this was a perfect opportunity. I need to recruit at least one person right now, he thought, stepping up. I'm Lee Han, captain of Team 13. We're currently short on members. Everyone is welcome, Kato chimed in, mocking him. Short? You mean you have 0? A few other captains volunteered too, but among the group, someone stepped forward to join Lee Han's team on their own. As soon as he saw that face, Lee Han's face lit up because it was his old friend Chose who had also reached level 2. That night, once everyone had settled into their dorms, Chose went to Lee Han's room for a heart-to-heart. Lee Han smiled, saying, "It's really great." Chose leaned back with his hands behind his head. "It'd be even better with one more member," he said casually. Lee Han let out a sigh. "Well, it is a new team, so thanks for trusting me and joining up. I've always wanted to be on a team with you, man," Chose said, flashing a grin as he looked out the window. "The guys who didn't join are the real idiots. If they knew what you were capable of, they'd be lined up out the door. Anyway, let's try to recruit someone else starting tomorrow." Chose stood up and stretched. "I'm heading back to my room now." But before Chose could even leave, there was a knock at the door. Lee Han opened it to find Kuro standing there, his face all bruised and battered. Lee Han asked in surprise, "Kuro, what happened to your face?" Kuro scratched his head, grinning through his teeth. "Heh, I told Kato I was quitting Team 7 and that jerk." "I can't believe he couldn't even kill you. That's insane. Are you really the same Kuro I know?" Kuro said modestly, "It's really no big deal." Seeing Kuro join their team, Chose was thrilled. "This is great, back to the same team we had on the desert island. I'm sure we won't lose no matter who we're up against." Just then, someone else approached and said, "Sounds fun. Mind if I join? Everyone's been talking about you like you're absolute trash. Lee Han looks like Team 13 is going to be the most fun." Lee Han and Kuro stared for a second, looking at the newcomer. Chose stepped behind Lee Han to see who it was. It was another familiar face. "Lee Han, you know him, right?" "He was in Class B, too." Lee Han smiled. "Of course I do. You're exactly who we need." Canis made finger guns with both hands, pretended to fire, and winked. "Take care of me, captain of Team 13. So we're an official team now, right?" Lee Han nodded. "Yeah, but we're a thorn in the side of the other teams. If we're not careful, we could get wiped out. You guys know what happens to us in that situation, right?" Canis gave a thumbs up. "I'm ready for anything." Kuro looked at Lee Han with full confidence. "Me too." Seeing his 3 new teammates, Lee Han felt even more determined. The weight was on his shoulders, but he felt like he could do this. "All right. See you all tomorrow, Team 13. The next day, the members of Team 13 gathered to report to their instructor a man who looked to be in his 40s. He had messy auburn hair and a somewhat stern look on his face. He looked them over and said, "Nice to meet you, Team 13. I'm Groman, your Level 2 lead instructor. So the team is Captain Lee Han, members Chose, Sachita, Canis, and Kuro, is that right? What happened to your face?" Kuro had a bandage on his face and his left eye was shut. He could have reported Kato's actions, but he chose to let it go. I slipped down the stairs, sir. Slipped. Grossman didn't buy that excuse for a second. He definitely got beaten up. But the fact that Kuro denied it caught him off guard. He sighed and said, "Be careful." Then he started briefing them on the team. "You'll have a grace period for competitions starting today. This period will last about 3 weeks. Once it's over, you'll have to start participating in the competitions, so get ready. The category and the opponents will be randomly decided by the head instructor, and you'll find out when the time comes." That's what they say, but given the current situation, things seem pretty intense. Lee Han finally understood what the man meant. He was basically telling them not to let their guard down. Their first match was against Team 9, the team with the most wins and the highest score in gunfights. Canis reached up to take off his protective helmet, grimacing. Ugh, it's so suffocating. I really don't like this at all. Just don't get hit and you'll be fine, right? But Lihan immediately pressed the helmet back onto his head. Canis, are you trying to get yourself killed? Lihan grabbed Canis by the head, pulled his face close, and threatened in a low voice, Don't you ever take that off. You aren't allowed to do that no matter what the situation is. Canis nodded, terrified. Lihan swore he wouldn't let anyone on his team die. He adjusted his own helmet and explained the strategy one more time, the mobile shelter. I just came up with the name, so don't you dare laugh. The other three didn't laugh. Instead, they looked more confused. What do you mean by mobile shelter? In their team's starting area, Lihan and his opponents were waiting for the signal to begin. The 4 members of the red team looked down on them as they had always despised Team 13. This time, they were confident they would finish this competition quickly. On Lihan's side, morale was just as high. Lihan was fully confident that they would definitely win this time. As the competition started, the crowd erupted into noise and shouting. Don't hold back! Team 9, destroy those traitors. Did Demichi come to watch Lihan's match? Seeing the crowd's reaction, he bared his teeth in a grin. They're actually pretty famous, aren't they? Simon was also there watching the battle, thinking to himself, there's no way you can win this. Where's your gun? What are you going to do? Lihan? Both teams began to move. The red team followed their usual plan, advancing in a line with no trace of hesitation. I bet they're trying to hide near the starting point. Yeah, that's probably all they can do. Let's go. Nearby, Canis was hiding behind a tree, observing them. Damn it, they're faster than I thought. He raised his hand to send a reconnaissance signal to his teammates. The opponents are within 200 meters. I'll join up with you guys. The opponents have reached the open field. It was quite advantageous for professional shooters, and Canis was hiding behind a tree not far away. A bit further off were the other 3 members of the team. Lihan was lying low, waiting. Seeing Canis's message, Lihan frowned and cursed under his breath. They've already made it here. Chus leaned against a tree, gasping for air from exhaustion, while Kuro was as usual quickly running out of steam. Damn it, those Team 9 guys won't even give us a second to catch our breath. Luckily, we're already prepared. But I need time to recover, Chus said, glancing at the tree trunk where they had started a small fire. Lihan looked into the distance and said, Canis must already know about our situation. Instead of coming toward us, he's definitely going to jump out in front of them to fight and stall for time. He risked it and took a hit. A bullet struck Canis in the leg and he screamed in pain. Even with the protective gear on, it still hurts like hell. After screaming, he hurriedly turned to run. It hurts, damn it! The red team members didn't miss this opportunity. They immediately rushed forward to chase Canis. Canis, eyes squinting, lifted his injured leg, turned toward them, fired his gun, and prayed silently. At least hit one of them now. Even if it's just one, that would be great. Bullets rained down on the red team, but they were quick to dodge behind some trees, so none of them were hit. Firing wildly like that isn't going to hit anyone. Feeling exhausted, Canis slumped to the ground. But just as he tried to take a breather, the opponents on the other side rained fire down on him again. Canis was pinned down and couldn't even catch his breath. He desperately rolled backward to hide behind a tree. According to the strategy, I'm supposed to join the team, but I'm just holding them back with this leg, so it's best if I just stall for a bit more time. The 4 guys looked around and only saw Canis, so a bit of doubt crept in. Why is there only one of them? Another one added, there are only 4 of them anyway. Why do we need scouts? Let's just finish this with a direct confrontation. I'm charging in, provide cover. On the other hand, the 3 members with Lihan, having finished their preparations, had recovered a fair amount of strength. Lihan held his gun and signaled everyone. We should get started too. Thanks to Canis, we've had enough time. I'm sure Canis is hurt, but he must have decided to buy us time instead of regrouping with us. Chus forced a smile and gave a thumbs up to praise Canis. Thanks to him, we've fully recovered. Seriously, I had absolutely no energy left to fight earlier. Lihan Kuro's giving a bitter smile because we spent all that energy using force fields and fire just to cut down those trees. The 2 of them, Kuro and Chosei, started tapping into their mental energy again, and Lihan said it's time to put it to good use. Team 13 is on the move, and the crowd is buzzing as they watch the screens. Lihan and the others are moving behind a tree being controlled by Kuro's telekinesis. Wait, are they cutting down that tree? Are they using it as a shield? Both Demichi and Simon spoke in unison, saying this strategy only works because of Kuro. As soon as they finished, they turned to look at each other, then shifted their focus back to the main battlefield. Kunut is still desperately fighting for every second. He's hiding behind a tree trunk, gun raised, firing back while staying in cover. But after firing for a while, he runs out of ammo and has to pull back to reload. Unfortunately, the red team's opponent has already closed in right on top of him, giving him no chance to dodge. I thought it was a trap, but it was just a stupid strategy. After spotting Simon, Demichi proactively walked over to stand next to him and gave his take. One member of Team 13 is down. They managed to hold out for a while, though. Now all that's left is that tree shield. Can they really win with just that? Simon immediately replied, "This strategy has a weakness. I'm certain Lee Han has realized it too. Back at the main battlefield, Lee Han's team has brought that tree shield along, using it as cover, which has the opposing team completely rattled. They keep opening fire, but they can't stop them. Since Team 9 chose their 4 members based on marksmanship, none of them have enough mental energy to blow the shield up. That thing, he knows about that. The captain of Team 9 eyes Lee Han, but as soon as they poke their heads out to fire a shot, they're forced back behind the tree to hide. Damn it, we have to drag this out as long as we can. I'm sure their members will eventually get exhausted from using their mental energy for so long." Hearing this, Lee Han glances at Kuro. Of course he's fully aware of that weakness. That's why this tree shield is just to get them close enough. Chosi is able to use his combustion ability. The flames spread rapidly, turning the trees red hot and sending thick smoke billowing toward the people hiding in the woods. Team 9 is even more confused now. Why is it suddenly on fire? Is that a combustion ability? Are we even allowed to fight like this? This display from them has left the spectators watching outside completely stunned. After finishing the burn, Chosei quickly grabs his gun again. Enough smoke, Chosei. Those bastards won't be able to see a thing in front of them. Lee Han nods and says with a grin, "Nice work. I'll leave the stragglers to you." The members of Team 9 are getting desperate. They have to run out from behind the trees to avoid choking on the smoke, but the direction they're running is right toward Lee Han, the only spot not covered in smoke. And that's when they become walking targets. 2 of them are down. The 2 remaining members are in the smoke, covering their noses with scarves and moving stealthily, convinced they won't be detected. But unfortunately, 2 stones fly through the smoke with pinpoint accuracy. They hit them dead on. They can shoot that accurately because they have Kuro, whose eyes can track all of their movements. Lee Han raises his gun again to take the final shot. It's over. Every member of Team 9 is out of commission. Team 13 wins. The crowd erupts into loud cheers, but the attitude is completely different from when the match started. How did they pull that off? Kuro was throwing rocks to mark their positions. And that Lee Han guy, his shooting is incredible. They actually did it. Lee Han, Kuro, those bastards. We won. Chosi and Kuro take off their helmets and give him a thumbs up. Lee Han smiles and gives a thumbs up back. Warm sunlight shines down and a cool breeze blows through it. They won. Right at that moment, the head coach is also watching the match, and it's clear he has some less than kind intentions toward Lee Han and Team 13 after their victory. Naturally, the thing to do is celebrate together. In Lee Han's private room, his group is having a feast packed with delicious food and soda. Canute happily raises his cup and laughs, saying, "This is because this is a special meal for the winning team. Well deserved for all the effort we put in," Chosi says with a wide grin. "Pretty cool, huh? You even got hit by a bullet," Canute adds happily. "Anyone who hasn't been shot yet isn't allowed to join in, okay?" Then glancing down at the lavish feast, he said, "Now that you've helped us secure the victory," Chosi picked up a chicken leg, pretending it was a microphone, and said, "Captain Lee Han, please tell us how you're feeling right now." Being put on the spot like that made Lee Han a bit shy, but he quickly shared his honest thoughts with them. "Thank you, everyone. It seems like the strategies throughout the match, and we're a bit overly tense, but I think it's thanks to everyone's hard work that we were able to pull off this win." Kuro, feeling a lot bolder now, raised his hand in a fist and said, "It wasn't that tense. Those strategies were absolutely top tier." Lee Han replied, "We were honestly just very lucky. Our opponents were strong, but they were also very predictable since most of Squad 9's members are just really good at marksmanship." Canute grinned from ear to ear and said, "That's awesome. The ability to predict the number of opponents. Just like I expected, my eye for judging people hasn't failed me." No sooner had he said that, Canute doubled over in pain, groaning. Chosei asked anxiously, "Do you need to go rest or something?" Canute forced a thumbs up, gritting his teeth against the pain, and said, "It's nothing, heh. Even if I were on the brink of death, I wouldn't miss a party like this." While they were celebrating in the instructor's building, there was one room still lit up: Gortman's office. He turned off all the lights and sat deep in thought in front of his computer screen. I paired them up against Squad 9, never expecting those brats to actually win. I want them to lose at all costs, but I need to put pressure on them before they start thinking they're something special. Gortman reached out and started navigating the screen, searching for a suitable team to face Squad 13. He paused for a moment on Squad 7. If it's Squad 7, they'll use all their energy to crush Squad 13. But what happens if Squad 7 loses too? Then I just need to find a way to make sure they don't lose. Gortman reached toward the screen and began rigging the match from his private office. After the party was over and they'd cleaned up and turned off the lights to sleep, Lee Han tossed and turned, unable to drift off. He ended up sitting up. Back in the day, there were times when I couldn't sleep either, because I was worried about what might happen during the day. But I have such incredible teammates now, so I should stop worrying. No matter who the opponent is, I'll take them down one by one. Lee Han silently prayed for another match to begin. This time, Lee Han's Squad 13 was scheduled to face Squad 1, the very same squad that had defeated Squad 7 earlier with the exact same lineup as before, and their captain was clearly prepared for his opponent's abilities. He said, "Everyone remember our strategy. We need to be careful with Kuro and Jose. When it comes to mental strength, they're definitely at the top of the second-year class." He reached out and patted his teammate on the shoulder, saying, "The two of us need to keep them busy. Their mental strength is strong, but you just need to keep them off balance. Make it so they can't concentrate anymore, and that's it. As for the others, I don't know how they fight. But they won't be a problem because we have the strongest one here." Colum heard this and thumped his chest. Outside, Demichi was acting naturally as he approached Simon, who was standing to the side, and started chatting with him. "Look at this matchup. Isn't it crazy how much the instructor hates them? I can't believe they'd be able to beat Squad 1 after that shootout with Squad 9. If they want to win, they have to take down their captain, the guy wearing the headband. But he's a monster. It's hard to suppress him. Even if 2 or 3 strong people charge at him with him in the lead, they'll easily take out the support from a distance and sweep the rest of the opposition. That's Squad 1's specialty, a tank charging in. In the end, what strategy will Lee Han use to face this? It's a difficult situation." Simon scowled, turned to look at Demichi and snapped, "Can you just watch and keep your mouth shut? Or can you not back to the match?" After approaching this blue team, Lee Han's team, the strategist for Squad 1 froze for a moment. "Why is that, Kuro? Is he the captain? Am I seeing things? Seeing Kuro acting as captain like this?" Squad 1's plan fell into a bit of disarray, as they had predicted Lee Han would be the captain. Colum asked anxiously, "What should we do now?" "We don't even see Lee Han." Chosei and Canute stepped forward proactively and said, "Don't be nervous, Kuro. Don't worry. We'll protect you no matter what happens." Kuro nodded, but his movements were still a bit stiff. He was nervous and fumbling while on the Squad 1 side after seeing this situation. "We haven't come up with any new strategies, so we'll just have to stick to the current plan," he growled, his voice low. "No matter where that guy is hiding, he won't be able to find a single opening in our defense." Colum, leading his team, charged toward Kuro like a tank while on a nearby tree. Lehan stood on a branch, surveying the battlefield. Victory in this format didn't mean they had to wipe out the entire enemy squad, they just needed to take down the captain. The two sides clashed. The fight looked incredibly intense as Chose and Canute had to give everything they had to protect Kuro until the plan could be executed. Chose gathered flames in his hand and lunged at the enemy. His eyes were burning with intensity, but he didn't choose to confront his opponent's weapon head-on. Instead, he suddenly ducked to dodge the staff and looked for a chance to counterattack from the side. Canute was struggling against Philip, barely managing to hold him off. Up in the tree, Lehan looked down at the fight below. They were right at the base of his tree now. A perfect position. Lehan gave a subtle nod to signal Kuro. Kuro began to mentally prepare for the coordination. There was nothing to worry about. They had practiced this more than enough. Lehan closed his eyes and let himself fall. Down on the battlefield, the fight was so fierce that no one had a spare second to notice the small movement above Kuro. Colum was unstoppable, like a mountain crashing into them. He attacked Chose and Canute at the same time, using his massive arms and rock-solid body. Colum was single-handedly controlling both of them. Seeing this, the members of Team 1 excitedly pushed forward, wanting to take this chance to defeat Kuro. High above, Lehan was already plummeting toward the ground. He was only about 4 or 5 meters away from Colum. "Victory is ours," Philip and his teammates charged toward Kuro, but Kuro's actions made them freeze. Kuro held both hands up to the sky. His eyes were fixed intently in that direction. Not daring to let their guard down for even a second, Philip hesitated, wondering, where is Kuro looking? That was until he heard a loud crash behind him, like something massive had just slammed into the ground. Philip startled and whipped his head around. The battlefield behind them was now engulfed in dust and debris, making it impossible to see the situation. What the hell is that? Philip frowned. Meanwhile, after coordinating with Lihan, Kuro slumped slightly from exhaustion. After all, it required extreme mental focus. The dust began to settle. It revealed a truly shocking scene. Column had been defeated. Chose and Canute were safe, and Lihan was standing on the battlefield right next to Column. In his hand was the red scarf that Column had been wearing on his head. He picked it up, stood tall, and smiled, saying, I think we just won. The battle was over. Team 13 had won. Everyone watching from the sidelines was stunned. What, did he just jump down from that tree? That tree is as tall as 5 buildings stacked together. I don't know if he's just reckless or what, but this is a bit over the top, don't you think? He's lost his mind, but man, that was cool. Damn it! The crowd was chanting Lihan's name once again. Demichi bared his teeth in a grin, looking at the scene. Look at that, the very people who were bad-mouthing him not long ago. I get it now. It's because every single time he shows them these kinds of unexpected, insane techniques. Someone nearby remembered that Lihan used to be in a different squad, so they started gossiping about the past. Why doesn't he join these matches more often? What is the Team 7 captain doing? How could he not keep a guy like that on his team? It looked like he wasn't exactly hearing many kind words from the crowd. These words reached Kato's ears, and naturally it made him furious. A day before the tournament with Team 1 began, our guys were training. Before the fight, Lihan walked up and said to Kudo, if it keeps going like this, the real battle will be a breeze. As expected, you're good, Kudo. Kudo replied, I think you're better than me, Lihan, but are you scared? Lihan answered, sure am. If we lose, you better watch out. Watch your nose. Tomorrow will decide the survival of the team. It's really hard to control everyone through telepathy, Lihan told Kudo. But if it were easy, everyone with telekinetic abilities would be doing it already. Kudo was still lost in deep thought about that. Lihan had planned that tomorrow he would jump from a height to ambush them. When that happens, just control the fall speed so that either yourself or the others don't end up dying. I trust you. Kudo returned to reality, clasping his hands together. I'm sorry, it's my fault that your arm got broken. Lihan reassured him. It's okay. At least no one died. That's a difficult task, and you did a great job. Lihan waved his hand to dismiss the concern. Canute agreed. Don't blame yourself too much, Kudo. If we didn't do that, would anyone else have been able to take down that monster in the match? Chose chimed in. Anyway, until Lihan's arm heals, there aren't any matches scheduled. Suddenly, the watch on his wrist flashed with a notification. The cheerful atmosphere in the room suddenly vanished. The match schedule was set in 2 days. Team 7 would face Team 13. A young man was rushing toward a door. Inside was a man. When the youth pushed the door open and entered, the man nodded and spoke up. I didn't think you'd come, Katosoki said to his teammates at that moment. Do you think you aren't at fault? Someone is injured, yet they're scheduling a match immediately. It's like they're telling us to just give up. Canute Mayu also shook his head, saying, besides, our opponents are Team 7. They're going to kick our butts because they're in top form. Cho Si thought it was truly infuriating. We should file a complaint about this. What the hell is this all about? Their teacher replied that it was obvious they would defeat Team 7. Don't tell me you lack the confidence to win. Katosoki was furious and snapped back. Even if no one on Team 13 were injured, we would still beat them anytime. The teacher looked up at him and asked, then you'll win, right? After leaving the teacher's room, Team 7 Captain Soki, Katosoki thought angrily to himself that the teacher wouldn't listen to a word he said. After a long sigh, he slowly walked down the hallway. Lihan told everyone, it's useless. Even if we complain, the only thing we can do is win. Truth be told, Lihan hadn't figured out how to win yet, but he would surely find a way before the match started. Suddenly, Katosoki approached from behind, cutting off their conversation. Interesting. He said, I hope you're okay, Lihan, but are you really fine with that arm? Lihan provoked him back, saying that while one hand was a disadvantage to fight Team 7, just his right arm would be enough. Furiously, he stepped closer and said to Lihan, Air combat isn't a battle you can win easily with such rushed preparation. If you're too kind, you'll never win. You know that, Li Han replied. I'll prepare a different strategy for you guys. If you don't take this seriously, you're going to get wiped out by us. Kato pointed straight at his opponents' faces and shouted, I'm going to kill you, Li Han, and you too, Kuzo! Just then, Li Han called him by his name, Kato. When Kato saw Li Han's expression, he shivered in fear. Li Han's face had darkened, and he said furiously, If you've never killed anyone, don't you dare threaten us like that. Just sit back and watch. Terrified by Li Han, he ran off. Everyone watched his back as he left. What an absolute jerk, someone said. Li Han spoke up. He's no pushover. Now let's head to the practice room. Everyone gathered at the practice room and began training together. Li Han struggled to control his flight board. He thought to himself, this is trouble. Even when he was in his best condition, he could only control 2 flight boards. Now he could only handle 1. He glanced at his teammates. Chosei was using his firepower, but it seemed he also had trouble managing 2 flight boards easily. They could only rely on Kuro. But Li Han didn't want Kuro to have to carry the team like that. Although Team 7 lacked a strong support, they were a balanced team with great morale and decent tactics. They were a strong team led by Kato. There was no chance of winning against them. Suddenly, from afar, Chosei called out to Li Han. He approached and announced there was a problem. He then showed Li Han his fireball blast, explaining, In air combat, there's nothing to burn. I don't think firepower will be very effective then. Furthermore, with everyone flying around, I don't think I can hit my targets easily. Li Han stood there deep in thought. From the stands, the members of Team 7 laughed, knowing the others were in trouble. The blonde guy said to Kato Soki, I don't think we have anything to worry about, Kato. He replied, Obviously. Our strategy for victory ensures we have nothing to lose. Our win rate is 100%. When the announcement came that Team 13 would continue to compete, everyone else began to gossip. Isn't Li Han still injured? And they have no experience in air combat. The day of the match between Team 13 and Team 7 arrived. Those watching felt like this was a setup for Team 13 to lose. That teacher really is a villainous coach. Canute Mayu sensed something. Behind him was Demichi. Mayu turned around and asked, What are you doing? He immediately turned away and said, You told me to stand next to you. He thought Demichi was causing trouble. Groman was trying to adjust the win probability of every team to around 50%, and the conflicts between teams were decided through the teacher's analysis. He thought that even if it were Li Han winning, this would be difficult. The 2 teams entered the match. After telling his teammates, Destroy them, show them our power, Li Han asked Chosei, How are you holding up? He flashed a grin while flexing, showing off those muscles of his that were looking pretty good. I'm going to burn everything to the ground, so don't worry, Li Han said, looking confidently toward his teammate. I'm counting on you to shine because you're the core of this strategy. Then the signal for the match to start blared out. Everyone get your flying carpets in the air. As they took control, the carpets shot upward and the entire arena erupted in a buzz of excitement. All eyes were on the number of flying discs Team 13 had. Kato's jaw dropped as he counted them. He saw 16 discs being controlled by Team 13. No way. Usually a second year could only handle 4 discs if they were a support role and 2 for anyone else. Even 2 of their members couldn't handle 2 discs just 2 days ago, but now they had 16. Even if each person controlled 2, that left 10 extra. There was no way Kudo could control 10 at once. Brian stood by and said, Kato, give us the order quick. Li Han spoke up. You seem pretty rattled, huh, Kato? I'll show you just how fast this goes. 16 flying discs were hovering behind Team 13. The Team 7 warriors were panicked and confused. Kato Soki barked at them. Don't just stand there panicking, stick to the plan. We'll take them down one by one. Team 13 braced for combat, never letting up. Back at the psychic training grounds, even though Li Han's psychic ability was below average, he had mastered the power to focus his energy exactly where he wanted it. He grabbed a flying disc and shoved it forward. If I use this right, I can not only control objects but make them fly even faster. He put everything he had into it. He launched the flying board like a missile toward Team 7. Kato Soki asked, Are you seriously planning to use all those boards like that? He held up his hand to block, adding, It's fast, sure, but if it's just a board flying straight at me, I can dodge it easily. He recalled his training, remembering that with no materials in their previous battles, he had thought his combustion ability was useless, but he and Li Han had made a plan before the match. Li Han had suddenly realized there was something they could burn. And this was it. The flying board reached Team 7 and suddenly exploded. A massive blast rocked the entire arena. Everyone was stunned, followed by an uproar of chatter. A single flying board costs more than a trainer's monthly salary. Then the crowd started cheering for Team 13. Who cares about the cost? Blow them all up. Over here, Lee Han and Chosei constantly coordinated, seamlessly launching and detonating the boards toward Team 7. The massive explosions sent 2 of Team 7's members flying and crashing to the ground. After Kato ordered his team to intercept them, fearing they'd blow up all his team's boards, one teammate hesitated, worried they'd get caught in the blast if they got too close. Just then, trainer Jossman came running over, screaming at them to stop the match immediately because of all the explosions. Kato and Jossman both shouted at Lee Han. After the match ended, the trainer and Lee Han were in a room talking. The trainer leaned his hands on the table, radiating killing intent. He stared at Lee Han. Facing the trainer, Lee Han thought to himself, "He called me here, huh? Just to stare at me for 10 minutes. Dealing with Sergeant Red is way easier. He would have already cursed me out by now." Jossman began scratching his head and spoke up. "Starting this conversation is really awkward," he began, then pointed directly at Lee Han. "Do you have any idea how much a single flying board costs?" When Lee Han heard the question, he only knew they were incredibly expensive. The trainer looked grim. "If you weren't a member of the A class, you wouldn't be able to pay that off in your entire lifetime." Lee Han asked, "You called me here, but isn't it to ask about my strategy?" The trainer shook his head. "Fundamentally, it didn't break any rules. But don't you see how controversial this will be?" He could only shake his head. "Some trainers would praise you for coming up with a creative strategy to loophole the system, but I'm the opposite. Next time you plan to do something like this, remember to let me know in advance." Lee Han replied, "Understood." But he still had one more thing he wanted to ask the trainer. The trainer answered, "Go ahead." Lee Han showed a serious expression. "If we were fighting against dragons, would this strategy still be controversial? Would you still be asking me how much these boards cost? We have to win at any cost. Isn't that the purpose of this training?" Hearing Lee Han say those words, Jossman stood up and laughed. "You've got me cornered there. You talk just like someone I used to know." He placed both hands on the table, looking at him with a smile. "I like your attitude, Lee Han. I'm really looking forward to your future matches." "You're dismissed." "Captain Lee Han," he finished, saluted Jossman, and walked out. As he reached the door, he ran into Kato Soki. Seeing Lee Han, Kato broke into a sweat, remembering the battle earlier, being drowned in a sea of smoke and fire without any way to counter. After being defeated by Lee Han, Kato pointed at him. "So what if you won with that cheap, cowardly strategy?" "Nobody's going to praise you for it," Lee Han calmly replied. "That'll be decided later. Were you standing here just to say that?" Annoyed by being talked to like that, Kato gritted his teeth and made an excuse. "I was just passing by." "Who would want to wait for a jerk like you anyway?" Having said that, he walked away cursing that he would definitely crush me when the time comes. "Don't you dare lose to anyone else," Lee Han said, looking at him with a truly strange expression. And he turned away as well. Back at the dormitory, the teammates were welcoming their captain Lee Han with a feast spread out to celebrate both him and their victory. Lee Han waved to everyone. Kuro asked if they had really decided, wondering if it would be against the rules, but Canute thought it was fine. "It's not against the rules, but it was close." Suddenly, during the party, Chosei glanced at his watch. Seeing this, Kuro asked him what was wrong. He stared at the watch and said, "Doesn't it always happen right when we're having a party?" Chosei pointed at the watch, and just as predicted, everyone panicked when the notification came in. "The match schedule in 7 days. A Capture the Flag match will take place between Team 5 and Team 13. Meanwhile, Demichi is doing pull-ups in the training room, his muscles looking incredibly toned. He thought to himself, after declaring war directly, they're making us fight the strongest team in that category. On this side, Lee Han nodded, thinking, that's typical Jason, one thing after another. The sun was slowly setting as Demichi headed back to the dorm after a workout. Sweat was pouring off him, and he thought, it's so hot I really need to take a shower. On the way, he accidentally bumped into a familiar figure, a guy with a dark expression, hair flowing long, who brushed past him. Wait a second, Demichi called out loudly. Captain, wait! No former captain since you're a captain now! He tapped the guy on the shoulder and said, Are you ignoring me just because you're a third year now? He proudly pointed at himself, boasting, even though no one asked, Team 5 is doing great now that I've become the captain. The guy kept his dark expression, turned his back, and said, "Nobody asked. Beat it before I force you to log out." Demichi broke into a cold sweat hearing that. Then he flashed a grin and said to the guy, "Not happening. Tell me all the details after we fight." Lee Han was in the middle of a fight and was being overwhelmed by a man. He gasped for breath, wondering, "What is wrong with this bastard?" He was way too strong. Before him stood a guy wearing a black coat with strange patterns and a mask. He held 2 blades in his hands, his eyes glowing fiercely as he stared at Lee Han from behind that mask. The skull-masked guy flashed toward Lee Han, unleashing so many moves in a split second that it caused him immense pain. In the end, Lee Han was defeated. Back to 6 days ago. Lee Han was talking to Coach Jossman. The two were discussing something that left Lee Han incredibly shocked. Jossman said with a grim face, "I can't go into details right now." Demichi had already been taken down by that long-haired guy, leaving him injured and unable to participate in the upcoming match. But the coach pointed and continued, "The match will still proceed as scheduled." Lee Han thought, "Without Demichi, Team 5 will be like a chicken with its head cut off. That's a guaranteed win, right?" Jossman then pulled out a stack of documents and said, "This is the real reason I called you here." Lee Han took the files, wondering what they were. The coach explained, "These are transfer applications to your team. You're famous for knowing how to utilize your team members. It seems Kato from a Team 7 was criticized." Lee Han read the papers thinking, "I knew this would happen." He figured most second years wanted to transfer, because if they joined his team, they could get into a fight right away. Jossman advised him to think carefully. "You don't have to decide right this second." Lee Han replied, "No need, I'll take them all. We can't afford to be picky." Finally, afterward, the people on the transfer list gathered. Lee Han said, "Welcome to Team 13. One by one, they introduced themselves to Lee Han, including a red-haired guy. He looked incredibly cheeky. His name was Trae-Ong Zizo. Then he announced to everyone, "We will start preparing for tomorrow's match. In the meantime, I will observe your special abilities and assign roles." He asked if anyone had any objections. Suddenly, someone spoke up. Lee Han noticed he was Korean and asked, "Do you have something to say?" He just waved his hand and said with a smile, "No, I just wanted to ask you to take care of a fellow Korean like me." At that moment, Lee Han frowned and barked, "I don't separate people by nationality. If you want special treatment, prove your worth first." The red-haired guy heard this and dropped his cheeky tone. "All right, just make sure you treat me well." After that, Lee Han told everyone, "That's it for today, dismissed." Then he turned and walked away. The redhead was furious, thinking the guy was so rigid. He turned around in a huff and stormed off. He even cursed in Korean. The others were left wondering about the insult he spat at Chongjizo an hour before the match between Team 5 and Team 13. Suddenly, the arena dome shut down, and the fighters inside wondered, "Are they trying to simulate nighttime?" Chose shouted angrily, "They're trying to make us lose by any means necessary." "How cheap," Lee Han said, calming everyone down. "Don't get too worked up. Our opponents are in the exact same environment as we are. Wait for your eyes to adjust to the darkness." His teammates nodded in agreement. The glue team would lead, Team Chose would provide cover, and Daido Kudo and the others would attack from the side. Lee Han, his face set with determination, told everyone, "Without Demichi, Team 5 is the weakest opponent we've ever faced, but don't get cocky. Give it everything we've got to win." 10 minutes later, the vanguard moved in, followed by the support team, and finally the group assigned by Lee Han entered as well. They took down the Team 5 members one by one. Lee Han asked his teammates, "Have they all been eliminated yet?" Canute May observed the scene and noticed one person still standing by the flag. He pointed at someone sitting near it wearing a black hooded jacket. Team 13 still had all their members and they were confused about him. He was the only one left. He just watched his teammates get beaten, then stood up and drew his 2 blades. He slowly advanced toward Team 13. Suddenly, in a flash, he took out 4 of them in a single strike. Lee Han, standing behind, saw the whole thing. Completely shocked, Kudo rushed in to shield Lee Han, but with just one kick, Kudo was sent flying. That's when Lee Han realized the guy had the ability to teleport. He moved right past him. Now he had no time to be surprised. It was just Lee Han and Chongjizo left as the hooded assassin lunged straight at them. The redhead raged, "I can't even get close to him." He ran toward the assassin, raising his sword to strike, but the guy was too fast. He dodged the swing easily. The redhead looked up following his movement and was kicked square in the face, collapsing on the spot. The spectators watching from outside were buzzing with commotion. Team 13 has been completely wiped out. Who is that guy wearing the skull mask? That bastard. Isn't that the silent one from the rumors? Suddenly, the whispers turned toward the man known as the Silent One. If it's him... During training, his central nervous system was damaged and he lost the ability to speak, but after that accident, his combat ability became abnormally fast and he became a test subject. That's a level 3. The murmurs grew louder. He's a level 3. Isn't it against the rules to let a level 3 participate in a level 2 match? Li-Han trembled, trying to grip his weapon to keep fighting. Sensing Li-Han's movement, the Silent One turned his head to look at him as he struggled to get back up. He stood up looking at the guy standing over his teammates. Li-Han told him, "I don't know who you are, but I don't plan on losing." The skull-masked figure stood firm. Li-Han gripped his weapon tight, his eyes glowing. The two lunged at each other. That silent guy with the mask was on an entirely different level. Compared to the rest of the level 2s, there was no way to win as things stood. So what would he do? Li-Han faced off against the masked man. Li-Han thought to himself, "If I don't block the next attack, I'm done for, but I won't go down that easily." Based on his analysis of what just happened, he can move about 30 feet in the blink of an eye. If we factor in the energy cost for such a massive move, he can probably only do that twice in a row. But the condition to win is to capture the flag, not to defeat the guy in the skull mask. If Li-Han could hold him off for a while, they could win, and his chance to stop him was when he used his ability. The masked man began to emit a source of purple power. The image around him blurred and then vanished. Phantom shadows lunged fast toward him. Li-Han counted in his head 1, 2, 3, and on the third beat he ducked, dodging the man's strike. The guy was completely taken aback by that. He parried Li-Han's counterattack. Li-Han missed, and the masked man kicked him hard in the chest. In pain, Li-Han was stepped on, and the man raised his sword, intending to stab him. Suddenly, the man noticed Li-Han wearing a confident smile. From high above his weapon came flying down, slamming right into the head of the masked man. The skull mask shattered, revealing a purple eye. The impact dazed him for a short moment before he regained his senses. At that moment, Li-Han had already run over and grabbed the flag, mocking the masked man. "You managed to recover in just 3 seconds. That's amazing, but that much time was enough for me to steal the flag." He held the flag, flashing a confident smile at him, and said, "This is our victory." The bone-masked guy was insane. Li-Han had actually defeated a level 3. "I should have joined Team 13, too." The blonde guy who had been watching the match from the start gritted his teeth. One day after that, in a peaceful spot, Kudo was feeding a ginger cat. He stroked the cat's fur and praised it. "Good kitten, you're eating well, aren't you? There used to be a cat just like you near the orphanage." Kudo grew somber, confiding in the cat. "I also used to have no friends. I wasn't good at anything. And I looked different, too." Then he broke into a happy smile. "But he's got his own unique talent now, you know. And he's got you, too." The cat just nodded in surprise. Suddenly, someone stepped out from behind him. It was Cheong-Jizo, who smirked and thought to himself, "This loser is talking to a cat. What a pathetic failure. His rank is clearly lower than mine." He spoke up and asked, "Kudo, what are you doing here?" Kudo was startled to find someone behind him. "Since when have you been here?" Jizo smiled and said, "Kudo, I think we should discuss a few things during our break." Kudo was confused about what there was to discuss. The redhead continued, "As you know, our team doesn't have a vice captain yet, and I think I should nominate myself for the role, and it would be great if Kudo supported him." Seeing this, the cat rubbed against the redhead's leg. He claimed the cat had soiled his clothes and kicked it. Kudo went pale at the sight while the cat panicked and ran away. The redhead kept talking, but suddenly a gust of wind blew past them. Kudo was furious, radiating a massive surge of energy. Cheong-Jizo turned pale with fright. The trash can behind him was crushed by Kudo's rage. The guy didn't dare to act arrogant anymore and looked terrified. Kudo said angrily, "Don't you ever do anything like that again!" "Not ever again." Cheong-Jizo trembled, raising both hands to assure him he wouldn't. Kudo walked away, leaving the redhead pale and shaking with fear, sitting slumped on the ground. Meanwhile, in the infirmary, Li-Han was visiting Demichi. He thought, "You surely didn't come here just for fun, did you? So what brings you here?" Li-Han looked at Demichi with a serious expression. "I can only offer a guess. Because it seems like ARC is still hiding a secret, but after seeing you, everything seems clear." He asked, straight out, "Who was the one who left you in this state?" "That was a grade 3, wasn't it?" Demichi was surprised by Li-Han's question. He confirmed, "That's right, he was the former leader of your team. Grade 3 is truly a completely different level." He clenched his fist. "Not just a difference in rank." Speaking up to this point, Demichi trembled with fear. I couldn't even move before being defeated. Damn it, Li-Han thought. It was the first time he had ever seen him so broken. Then he suddenly said and told Li-Han, "Oh, that's right. That guy. At that moment, he wasn't himself anymore. It was like he had gone insane." Li-Han said, "If he wasn't like that from the start, then it seems like there are some things that need to be addressed regarding the activities of those grade 3s. Think about it. The equipment for grade 3s at ARC is quite lacking, and it's extremely rare to encounter a grade 3. The two suddenly realized something. There are still many stages before we complete grade 2 training. That means they will have to engage in real combat before reaching grade 3. Is that even possible? Meanwhile, over here, a robot stood behind the warehouse door. The door slowly opened wide and he stepped out. At that moment, the cat that Kudo had been chasing was also there. He finally found it. Overjoyed, he headed toward the cat without paying attention to his surroundings. He happily picked up His Majesty and asked if he was hurt. Let's head back. He promised to give His Majesty lots of delicious food. Before he could leave, Kudo suddenly felt a chill down his spine. He was startled as the robot had already approached him and the cat. The robot asked, "Who are you?" Kudo was panicked but didn't forget to raise his hand to protect His Majesty, wondering, whose voice is this? Suddenly, the robot removed its mask to Kudo's shock. It was Sergeant Red. He smiled and recognized him. "Kudo, you look so different, I almost didn't recognize you." Just then, at the ARC Development Center, Sergeant Z asked Kudo, "Are you lost? You've gone pretty far." Then the sergeant handed Kudo a can of soda and said, "A vehicle will come to take you back to the dorms. Drink this while you wait." Kudo took the can and thanked him. As he opened it, he looked at the sergeant and asked, "Aren't you mad at me, sir?" Sergeant Z was surprised. "About you being here," Sergeant Z explained. "The second-generation spirit power armor you just saw will be announced soon. So it's fine for you to know about it a little early, because a grade 2 like you can't just leave ARC on your own anyway." Hearing this, Kudo suddenly looked disappointed. "That's right, our reinforced bodies aren't allowed to leave this place until we can't fight anymore because we are the property of ARC." He agreed with Kudo. Then the sergeant continued, "And those people who suddenly get angry, those are the ones with rotten personalities. They're crazy, don't you think?" Kudo went pale, incredibly surprised. He thought to himself, Sergeant Z doesn't seem to realize he's talking about himself. Suddenly, a professor appeared behind him. He asked, "How's the testing, Z?" The sergeant smiled and replied, "Exactly what I expected from you, old man. The spirit power response rate is very high. But Sergeant Z has an opinion. I think you should reduce the dragon materials in the power-up system. It's important, but if it's that sensitive, and it'll be very difficult to control. Unlike our first generation, these kids can summon spirit power as easily as breathing." As he spoke, the sergeant patted Kudo on the shoulder. The professor smiled at Kudo and introduced himself. "Nice to meet you. I'm Team 1 Captain Charlie Smith." Kudo reached out his hand as well. I shook his hand and introduced myself. "Hello, my name is Kudo." Sergeant Z, standing behind me, chimed in, "This old man is the legendary designer of psychokinetic armor." The professor pointed up to the sky and said to Kudo, "The first generation was built in such a rush that it's still pretty rough, but the second generation has seen major improvements. It's going to be the best gear out there," the sergeant told him. "It was designed specifically for you kids. I rarely have any control over it," Kudo thought, biting his lip. He imagined himself wearing that armor, standing all alone against a swarm of dragons. Heading into a real battle, eventually the car arrived. Kudo said goodbye to the two of them and hopped in to head back to the dorms while Sergeant Z puffed on his cigar. He asked, "Charlie Smith, what's going to happen to the armor I tested today?" The old man replied, "It will be dismantled and recycled based on the rarity of the parts." "That's why we're always short on materials," Jack muttered, turning to ask, "Why don't you just leave it as it is? How can you be so sure? Who knows, maybe someone will actually wear it someday." The daily schedule for the teams starts at 5 in the morning, but Li-Han always wakes up at 4 to draft battle strategies or record the special abilities of his teammates. Among other things, of course, he also objectively recorded his own skills and graded them. His psychokinetic power was still below average. In other words, it was barely effective. He couldn't even perform the basic telekinesis that Instructor Wave had taught them. But on the flip side, he possessed a unique ability that only he had among all the kids there: absolute precision when using psychokinesis. Kudo and Simon could use their telekinesis to turn a pencil into powder, but they couldn't use that same power to write with it. He could suppress everyone else when it came to controlled psychokinesis. He resolved to train harder to refine this precision. Li Han then raised his arm to check his watch. He realized it was time to head out. A moment later, he and his teammates were out jogging on the field, pushing themselves as if it were an indirect competition. Just then, Demichi ran alongside Li Han and started a conversation. Li Han asked him, "What did you think of the spatial rift you saw yesterday?" Demichi replied, "Nothing special. It's just shiny. It's a great spot for a date." A spatial rift is a remnant left behind when the dragon army attacked and the portals were sealed shut. Under Jossman's command, the Level 2 students were split into 2 groups to inspect the rifts. Jossman announced to everyone that a spatial rift is a direct connection between Earth and other worlds, and there's a theory that it influenced the emergence of psychics. He confidently stated that seeing the rift would be a great learning experience for all of them. There's no danger, so don't worry, it was formed over 15 years ago. But there hasn't been any activity since then. Li Han wondered, "I heard psychics get a strange feeling when they get close to it. Is that true?" According to what Demichi knew, "You might get a bit dizzy, but it's hard to explain. Are you going to see it today? Just feel it for yourself." With that, he sped up and bolted away, leaving his teammates behind, panting and out of breath. Right then, under the clear blue sky, everyone finished their training. Li Han announced to the group, "We'll gather at the helipad at 10 in the morning. After you eat and wash up, you can enjoy some free time." Chosi laughed, feeling like they were on a field trip. The team then dispersed. From behind, a guy walked up and reached out to chat with Li Han. He was wiping off his sweat when he suddenly heard a voice and turned around. The guy offered to treat him to breakfast. Li Han smiled, recognizing him as John, the captain of Team 10. John happily replied, "I'm honored you still remember me." After silence was defeated, Jordan no longer openly wanted us to lose, but we had lost to them a few times. Team 10 was one of the few teams that had beaten them. Li Han reached out his hand to the captain. He expressed that he wanted to learn more about their strategies and would love to chat. John scratched his head and replied, "I'm nothing compared to you." At this point, the military helicopters had landed on the ground ready to pick them up. Now on the chopper, an instructor told everyone, "Sinuiju, where we are headed, is one of the 6 locations where a spatial gate opened during the first invasion." The Dragon Army was summoned there. They split into 2 groups heading toward South Korea and China. North Korea faced them with nuclear bombs, but it wasn't effective and caused the northern region of Korea to become a dead zone. The North Korean government was dissolved and the refugees crossed the border. The Republic of Korea accepted these refugees while still fighting off the invaders. And they still haven't fully recovered from the social and economic chaos that occurred during that period. Suddenly someone spoke up, wondering, "Isn't Korea Li Han's home?" He replied, "That's right. Jizo and I were both born there." The fleet of military aircraft flew across the sea and neared the island. In the distance, a large rift appeared with a purple light radiating from it. They had arrived at Sinuiju. The back ramp of the aircraft slowly lowered. Inside, Li Han and his teammates stepped out. They could feel a massive amount of energy radiating from the rift. The pressure from this energy kept growing stronger. Li Han wondered, what is this pressure? It engulfed every single military aircraft there, and illuminated them all. It was so intense it felt as though they could be swallowed whole at any moment. Ahead of the helicopter's flight path, lightning began to strike. The guys started to feel scared and didn't want to go any further, despite making up every excuse just to get home and sleep early. Li Han said nothing. He just stared silently out the plane window, thinking to himself that if they were Team 4 and Team 10, then he and the others must be flying close by. Someone on the other helicopter spotted him and even smiled, giving him a thumbs up when suddenly a purple burst of energy erupted from that military chopper. Li Han was stunned, and then it spontaneously exploded. Witnessing the scene, Li Han turned pale. What on earth was that light? Team 10 had just been wiped out. He had only just spoken to John for the first time this morning when a loud shout from Li Han jolted him out of his panic. The instructor called out to him, saying, "The situation is extremely critical. Your team members are preparing to jump. This helicopter is smoking and about to explode." He was going to send a status report to headquarters about the incident. "Hurry up, they're getting ready to jump," Li Han directed them as they jumped out one by one. The instructor told Li Han, "Once you get down there, gather the team members and wait for rescue. If your lead instructor can't make it, you take charge, all right?" Before he could finish his sentence, that purple energy beam struck the aircraft and it exploded mid-air. The blast sent both Lai Han and the instructor flying. Fortunately, Lai Han managed to jump out and was only slightly injured. He thought of the instructor who had been blown up with the chopper. At that moment, his parachute was snagged on a tree branch. Li Han took a deep breath, exhaled, and regained his composure. He told himself, "We've been trained for this. There are surely some people injured or in shock who can't move. I need to find them first. Let's head toward where the smoke is rising." Looking ahead, he wondered, is that where the helicopter crashed? Or maybe it's a signal flare for help. After that, he took a knife from his bag, cut the parachute cords, and landed. As he walked cautiously through the forest, he heard a rustling sound and spun around completely on guard. He braced himself ready to strike at any moment. It turned out to be Cheong Zizo. Lai Han asked why he was there, instead of being with the other squad members. Zizo explained that during the jump he had watched their helicopter and noticed that Lai Han was the last one to jump. In situations like these, you need to find the leader first. Hearing that Lai Han silently praised him, he hadn't expected the kid to make such a sensible decision under the circumstances. "He's better than I thought." Li Han told him, "Let's go. We need to regroup with everyone as soon as possible." The two of them headed deeper into the woods. Lai Han didn't forget to tell the redhead to break branches and leave markers on the trees to avoid getting lost. Finally, they reached the crash site where the wreckage was still smoldering. Li Han assumed this was Platoon 2 and that Squad 8 must be on their way. As they stepped inside the burning wreckage, they saw bodies scattered all over the ground. Zizo turned pale with fear, thinking to himself, "If we hadn't escaped, we would have ended up like this." Thinking that, he felt a chill and began to feel nauseous. He couldn't handle the pressure. He wondered why Lai Han showed no emotion and had no expression on his face. He asked, "Are you not affected by this at all?" Li Han replied nonchalantly, "Because this happens so often. This isn't the first time we've seen bodies. There are always people dying in the Ak." He turned his back and urged Zizo to move faster before more people died. Suddenly, a monster appeared in front of Lai Han, a six-eyed savage wolf with a horrifying shape standing over the wreckage. Lai Han hardened his expression, drew his combat knife, and ordered Zizo to find something useful in the helicopter. He would hold it off. Zizo, already terrified, grew even more panicked and asked, "Can't we just run away?" Li Han explained, "If we turn and run, we're definitely dead. This bastard is much faster than we think. They had to kill it right here, right now." The savage wolf began to attack Lai Han with its tentacles. Again, he urged Zizo to find something useful in the wreckage to help deal with it. Panicked Zizo could only run straight toward the helicopter. As he ran, he kept thinking about how much he wanted to escape this place. But on this side, Li Han had managed to cut off the monster's tentacles and told Zizo, "Good, get inside." No sooner had he said that than the monster flew into a rage, lunged at him, and bared its razor-sharp teeth. It thrashed around wildly, forcing Li Han to just barely dodge. Zizo was standing in front of the still-burning helicopter, trembling violently. He didn't want to go in there at all. "If we keep fighting like this, we're both going to die. What if I use Lai Han as bait and run for it? After that..." He slapped himself for even having such a cowardly thought. He told himself he wasn't a spineless traitor and decided to push forward. Meanwhile, the savage wolf lunged, snapping its sharp fangs repeatedly at Li Han. The redhead also fought past his fear, rummaging through the debris for something useful for Lai Han. He found a metal pipe and thought, "Just take it, I guess." If it were Lai Han, he'd definitely have a plan. On the other side, the tentacle Lai Han had cut off regenerated, wrapped around his arm, and began to constrict. Suddenly, a piece of steel was thrown from behind, striking the savage wolf in the head. Both Lai Han and the wolf looked toward Zizo, who had arrived carrying a makeshift spear. He charged in to save Lai Han and yelled, "Sorry, I'm late!" The savage wolf, now angry, shifted its focus to the redhead, who kept pelting it with pieces of scrap metal. If it were Li Han, Zizo would definitely be watching his every move and reacting accordingly because he's just that sharp. The red-haired guy put all his strength into throwing a spear at the Lai Han wolf that was frantically charging at Zizo. The beast had already grabbed the redhead and slammed him to the ground. It bared its razor-sharp teeth to attack, but suddenly a lethal strike pierced its head, taking it down right in front of Zizo. It was Li Han who landed the blow, the monster collapsing on top of Zizo as it fell. He winced and asked, Is it dead?" He wiped the blood from his face, feeling as if his whole body were falling apart. Li Han reached out to help him up. "Yeah, it's dead." "You did well, Zizo." The two of them slung their arms over each other's shoulders and kept moving forward. The rescue team would be here soon. Just hang in there a little longer. Back with his teammates, they had lit a campfire. Surely Li Han would spot the smoke and make his way there. Kudo said confidently to everyone, "If Li Han is out there, no matter what happens, he'll handle it perfectly." Jose agreed, adding that Li Han always makes sound decisions. The people from the other team couldn't help but feel that Squad 13 truly trusted their captain. Once they saw his combat prowess, it was easy to understand why. Why they trusted each other so deeply. Suddenly, figures stepped out from the woods. Kudo, thinking it was Li Han, greeted them joyfully. But it wasn't him, they were from Squad 9. Knut Maeo pointed at them and asked, "There are 6 of you. Did your helicopter crash too?" They shook their heads. Then the white-haired guy looked down and said, "We were cornered. Both our guide and our captain have already been wiped out." Li Han's teammates panicked as they realized, were they the only lucky survivors left? Suddenly a voice rang out from behind the bushes. "Everyone, have you encountered the wolves?" It was Li Han and Jizo. There are 3 types of monster tribes, and they control these wolves as if they were their own hunting dogs. The remaining survivors panicked. "What do we do now? We have no weapons, no gear. Are we just going to die helplessly like this?" Li Han spoke up, telling everyone to focus. He said he already had a plan. Everyone turned their eyes toward Li Han as he continued. "Everyone, please, lend me your strength." Li Han was deadly serious. "Even if the rescue team is on their way, it's going to take at least 5 hours. We have to build a fortress to hold out until then." 2 hours later, everything was ready. Wooden stakes and large boulders were placed all around them, creating a perimeter that looked safe, at least for normal people. If we didn't have weapons, we wouldn't be able to do anything, but since we're psychics, anything is possible. But is it really okay to burn torches this brightly? Either way, these wolves have superior smell and night vision. For now, we just have to wait. Just then, Knut Maeo asked Li Han, "Right now, it's just the 2 of us, so I have to ask even if the rescue team does arrive. What if the signal gets lost, just like those other helicopters? Will they even know what the situation is here?" Li Han replied calmly. "For now, we just need to survive. Let's focus on figuring out an effective strategy." The blonde guy thought to himself, "Just as I expected of him. Li Han knows everything. Is this battle really this desperate?" By now, all that ambition and competition felt like nothing more than a joke. Suddenly, the sounds of monsters echoed throughout their base, growing louder and louder. Everyone went on high alert, and Kudo used his power to create a shield enveloping the entire base. Everyone was shocked. When did Kudo get this strong? At 6 o'clock, a beast is charging in. "Spear team, focus your fire on the target." Li Han and Knut Maeo lunged forward with spears, while the spear team was instructed to launch with as much raw, intense power as possible. Don't think of throwing this spear as an act of protection, because that will only slow down the flight speed of the spear. The team coordinated and fired one spear after another at the monster. It hit the mark and began to wail in pain. Li Han and the blonde guy lunged with their spears to strike the wolf's head, but it still managed to use its tentacles to whip Knut Maeo 10 meters away. The monster kept pushing forward, but it stepped right into the trap they had set beforehand. It fell into the snare and was brought down then. Li Han signaled the next position to Kudo. "At 12 o'clock, 2 beasts are rushing in and they're incredibly fast." He kept ordering Chao Si to fire up a wall of flames, and the wolves were blocked by the fire. Seeing that, Li Han continued to utilize his teammates' strengths, ordering them to stop and then start taking out the clustered monsters, followed by the wolf that was trying to breach their base. It was taken down by the sharp spears while the others were incinerated by Chao Si's fire. Now only the last one remained. This time they seemed to have figured it out and were using their backs to block the attacks. "Attack it, keep holding out until we run out of spears." Li Han realized they seemed to have some intelligence, and then he snatched a spear from a teammate and lunged forward with Jizo, intent on finishing it off. "I'm going to rip your mouth apart." He slammed a spear straight into its limb, pinning it down. Then Jizo used his spear to pierce its head. He's as savage as ever. "Shut up and die, you bastard!" Suddenly, Kudo spotted something and warned Jizo about the danger. The wolf attacked him with its claws before collapsing. Jizo thought to himself that it was lucky only his clothes were torn. Before he could even finish that thought, an arrow pierced his stomach. He slumped down in front of Li Han, apologizing for not being able to handle everything. But getting shot by an arrow is better than being attacked by a dire wolf. Li Han, busy supporting the heavily wounded man, ordered Kudo, "If there are archers, find their position. It's time for the ambush team." The 4 trump cards Lee Han had kept until the end were the 3-man ambush team that stayed hidden when everyone thought it was all over. Then the Elu hunters appeared using psychic powers to ride on planks as if they were flying through the air. Once Kudo located the Elu hunters, he would escort everyone to them. They just needed to catch and take them down before they realized what was happening and set up a defense. Everyone take them all out. Kudo had reached his limit. Blood was dripping from his nose and his limbs were trembling. He couldn't push his stamina any further. They had truly used up every bit of their strength. If more enemies appeared, they would have to run away quickly. Suddenly, Lee Han heard the sound of many dire wolves. The wolves were approaching, swarming to surround Lee Han's team. He realized they were trying to encircle them. Their leader must be somewhere nearby. Suddenly, he spotted White Fang, the leader, a werewolf type. It bared its sharp fangs, releasing a murderous aura that coiled around their feet. The aura was freezing everyone. The howling of the wolves echoed through the forest. Lee Han wondered what he should do. Finally, points of light appeared in the sky. Lee Han snapped back to reality. They were going to live. He tore through the oppressive aura and ordered everyone to pick up their spears. They just needed to hold on a little longer. Even though Kudo was exhausted, he tried to use his strength to hold on a bit more. His body started shaking, but everyone fought hard to keep holding the line. The wolves kept charging madly. Suddenly, a beam of light shone from the sky, dropping a crate right onto the wolves' heads. A massive explosion roared, kicking up a cloud of dust. A door on the crate opened. A suit of armor stepped out. It was Sergeant Z. "It's a miracle you guys lasted until now." Back at the base under a clear blue sky, Jose looked up and said, "Truly a miracle." Baconut and May agreed. It really was a miracle. Half the regiment was wiped out that day. But we survived. Jose silently praised that psychic-powered armor. "Amazing, isn't it? We had such a hard time killing those werewolves, and it just sliced through them like butter." But you know, even though it was terrifying and everyone was happy to have survived, only Lee Han seemed deep in thought. Lee Han sat in his room thinking since returning from the space rift, the petty feuds between squads and the competitions had become meaningless. At the psychiatric clinic, a man with a parted hairstyle told Lee Han that he used to hate him, but he was very glad to see he was still alive. "Just like you said. I'm not ready to kill anyone or watch others get killed. Finally, I've realized who our real enemy is." Lee Han's resolve hardened. He thought to himself, the enemy's forces are not like ours. We have to become stronger. Just then a hand knocked on his door. Because he didn't respond for a moment, the person punched straight through the door, startling Lee Han. Suddenly a voice played from his wristwatch. "Lee Han, you've been summoned. Come immediately. Emergency meeting, assemble now." Lee Han walked down the hall with skull mask. Even though he had covered the hole in his door, he wondered why the guy had to punch through the wall. This guy is seriously insane. Lee Han finally spoke up. "Could I ask who called for this meeting?" The guy typed a message and played it for Lee Han. "It's Sergeant Z, and stop bothering me." "Fine." Lee Han thought maybe he doesn't like me because of the last match. They reached a high-rise building where 2 people were waiting on the sofa. Lee Han spoke up. "Did you call for me, Sergeant Z?" The person sitting across from the sergeant was Dell. Simon Sergeant Z, as grumpy as ever, said, "Don't just stand there like a lost dog. Sit down. This is going to take a while." Flashback to the emergency meeting. 1/4 of the Tier 2 members died in the incident. And it wasn't during real combat, but during training. "We have to ask the High Command and reveal the truth." Alexander Zekot, the head of the ARC staff, spoke about the heavy property damage to the ARC. He sighed. "That is the final decision of the High Committee. Head Trainer Jossman will be given full responsibility. Now let's talk about the incident. From the flight recorder footage of the aircraft, the attack is suspected to have been planned by Enlo mages. What does everyone think? Feel free to speak your mind." "We have always hunted werewolves and low-level warriors like the Enlo hunters," the trainer said, "but this time they took the initiative. And the Enlo mages even revealed themselves. This is the first time that's happened since the war began. The Enlo mages also have the ability to open portals now. Perhaps the war will happen sooner than the prophecy. Should we wake the oracle?" At this moment, Sergeant Z suddenly remembered something. "Over here," the sergeant says with a somber face. "Listen up, everyone. We've only got one call sign left for this task force. Choose between white or whiskey." A thought flashes through Lee Han's mind. Delsimon and he are a temporary team for a special mission. Delsimon and he are on the same squad. Suddenly, the guy in the skull mask speaks up, choosing white. Lee Han and Delsimon go along with him. Hearing that Sergeant Z nods and decides, fine, the team call sign will be whiskey. Everyone else is left speechless. He then crosses his legs, rests his arms on the sofa, and says, now I'll lay out your objective. Flashback to the emergency meeting earlier regarding the Oracle. I know having an Oracle would be great right now, but there will be times when we need them even more later. Then the commander asks, Sergeant Z, what do you think? He hangs his head low, then speaks up, we should drop the whole Oracle business. But please grant me the authority to form a squad. The commander is surprised to hear the sergeant's plan. We will capture and interrogate them. It's the easiest way to extract information from the enemy. The three of them will capture the Enro mages in Shinuju. Afterward, they head to a laboratory and meet a bald man. He's the scientist there named Octo. Welcome, you second years, he says happily to them. Go ahead and pick out your basic dragon weapons first. There are serial numbers on them, so just remember to return them when you're done. Lee Han picks up a spear, thinking to himself, so, this is a dragon weapon. Suddenly, the spear emits a blue light, the spearhead turning blue. The scientist gives a confident smile and says, the dragon material is absorbing your mental energy. Delsimon picks up a few weapons, then asks, are there any other types? Like something with a longer, narrower blade? The scientist gets a bit annoyed at his question and replies, you get custom weapons at third-year, kid. Do you think I can just crank one out every single day? Simon just clicks his tongue and says, yeah, whatever. Next, the engineer brings out the next piece of gear they need. It's a sphere that can hover in midair. The two of them look confused, wondering if it's a hoverboard. The scientist explains that he stripped away all functions except for its mobility. Finally, Lee Han is fully geared up as a soldier. He and the others step onto the military helicopter. Good luck, kids. They arrive at the Shinuju spatial rift. To avoid an ambush, they land the helicopter far away from the area. After that, they slowly walk toward the operational zone. Sergeant Z reminds everyone that this mission is called Capture the Mages. The goal is to capture the Enro mages alive and return. The search order will be Silent C, Sergeant Z, Lee Han, and finally Simon. Back to before the mission started. Lee Han had asked Z, why add me to this mission? There are third-year students much stronger than me. At this moment, Sergeant Z, while holding a cigarette, tells him, if I wanted to choose someone with more combat skill, I would have, but from a strategic standpoint, it's different. Lee Han's group managed to survive without any gear when fighting those monsters. Z continues, that's not your only strength. Most kids who return from a spatial rift are suffering from trauma. When placed in a harsh environment like a battlefield, people eventually break. The sergeant continues lighting his cigarette and says, looking at that speed, Lee Han is truly a monster. Sometimes I even thought he was a maniac. The only thing he's missing right now is experience. Real combat experience. That's why the sergeant chose him and Simon. At this moment, Simon is remembering when Lee Han defeated a third-year student, then looks toward Silent C. I'll show you all who the best really is. The sergeant announces, we'll take turns resting. Silent C and Lee Han and the rest is Simon and myself. We're splitting into two teams. They set up camp in a ruined building. According to the plan, 2 soldiers are resting while the other 2 are on guard. Lee Han senses the forest is right in front of them. Suddenly, Lee Han's expression darkens. He remembers the members of Squad 13 who couldn't return. He knows the chances of saving them are very low, but they might be somewhere out there. While sitting and resting, Lee Han accidentally sees Silent C taking off his mask. Seeing Lee Han watching, he quickly puts it back on. Han explains, I'll look away. Why don't you take the mask off for a bit? Silent C is surprised and types a message lying that he isn't hot. A moment later, they arrive at the mission area. From this point on, communication devices won't work through normal channels. We're switching to the squad network. They are cautious and alert, searching every corner of the forest. Suddenly, Silent C spots 2 Enro mages. He is approaching them. The other soldiers also aim their guns. Over the radio, the order is given, take them out. Silent C flashes forward. With 2 quick, clean strikes, the heads of the Enro scouts were instantly severed. Then he appears in front of his teammates. Sergeant Z thinks to himself, he even had a message ready. That's insane. Lee Han and Simon are incredibly shocked, thinking, that ability is too outstanding. It's like using a cheat code for assassinations. Suddenly, Silent C spots one more. He quickly ducks into a nearby bush. After that, he slowly creeps forward with the intention of assassinating the next 2. Suddenly, Li Han speaks into his radio. Wait. He observes them and says, I think it'd be better if we followed them instead of killing them. The sergeant asks back, why? He explained that they were heading toward the water trail without any sign of caution, mostly because they were returning from scouting. Z realized this and praised him for being sharp. Great observation skills, Li Han, Silent C said. We'll follow them from a distance. Simon, meanwhile, thought only of killing them. Not yet, Li Han, he muttered. I'll surpass you soon enough. Silent C followed them, slowly using the camera on his mask. He recorded the details of their movements. At the edge of the water gap, a few Enlo soldiers were standing guard. An Enlo mage was holding a staff, raising both hands to perform some kind of strange ritual. Z asked everyone if they saw the stone on the mage's staff. That's a psionic stone, he said. I'm sure you all learned about those. Li Han and Simon realized that if it was a psionic stone, a crystal capable of storing massive amounts of psychic energy, that was definitely what they used to shoot down their aircraft. It looked like it was currently charging. It was glowing, so it might be able to fire another shot. They observed 1 Enlo mage and 6 Enlo warriors on the enemy side. That made 7 in total. Luckily, there were no werewolves. Z ordered everyone to gather at Silent C's position to start the mission Capture the Enlo Mage. It has teleportation abilities. We have to catch it before it spots us. The soldiers were guarding the mage very strictly. Z ordered Silent C to take down the mage while he and the others handled the rest. No mistakes allowed from here on out, Li Han observed. Down below it was lit up like midday. Looking from a distance, he saw things lying on the ground. He wondered to himself, what is that? Suddenly looking closer, he realized those were his own teammates lying on the ground. Seeing that scene made Li Han completely lose his composure. He trembled with rage. Z noticed his psychic energy leaking out. Why is it acting up all of a sudden? If this continues, everyone will be in danger. But the Enlo mage could detect psychic energy. He thought, it should be fine, just don't advance. He then signaled the whiskey team to retreat. Sergeant Z looked toward Li Han, who was losing control. I suppose I need to take care of this kid. But that level of energy still wasn't enough for the Enlos to detect them as long as no more energy leaked out. Suddenly, the energy radiating from Li Han grew stronger and stronger. Sergeant Z was a bit flustered trying to think of a plan when the mage spotted them and aimed straight at them. Seeing that the sergeant lunged toward Li Han, the mage fired an energy beam at him. The sergeant arrived just in time to shove him away, saving him from the mage's destructive laser. A massive bolt of energy struck the sergeant, obliterating everything in its path. Li Han panicked and called out, Sergeant Z! He lay weakly on the ground and asked the boy, have you calmed down yet? A lot of blood was flowing from the sergeant's legs. He had lost one leg in that blast. He endured the pain and said to Li Han, if I can't fight anymore, you will take command, now go move. Li Han, terrified and consumed by guilt, told everyone, we're retreating. Cover me, Silent C. And Simon began fighting, providing cover for him. Li Han carried Sergeant Z away. Furious at himself, he cursed, damn it! The mage ordered the Guardian soldiers to attack the remaining 2. Both sides clashed fiercely. Silent C used his sword to fight one of them. On this side, the Guardians advanced on Simon. He fired his machine gun at them, but it seemed the bullets had no effect. Realizing this, he put the gun away. He began using his own abilities, controlling 2 large rocks from the ground and throwing them forward, taking one down. But he was too slow, and the other one reached him. He stood there, bracing for the impact, when suddenly a smooth blade flashed by, slicing through the Enlo's arm and head. It was Silent C. He had taken it down with a single stroke. The monster collapsed in front of Simon, its blood splattering onto his armor. Watching Silent C take down the monster, Simon wondered, how on earth did Li Han manage to take down a guy like this? Realizing their team couldn't defeat them, the mage ordered them to stop fighting and return to his side as guards. The Enlo soldiers turned and headed back to their original positions. Next to the mage, Simon wondered, did they just give up on chasing us? Afterward, the 2 returned to the position where Li Han and Z were. Li Han just sat there in silence, his face dark. It's my fault. I ruined the plan. Knowing Silent C was hot-headed, he walked up and punched Li Han straight in the face. The punch was so powerful that Li Han was sent flying 10 meters away. Simon stepped in from behind and touched his shoulder, saying, that's enough. His had been injected with painkillers and his wounds were bandaged. We can't follow the plan anymore. Being stubborn will only make it worse. We should retreat. Li Han stood up, blocking that idea. No, we're sticking to the plan. Hearing this, Silent C shoved Simon aside and walked over to kick Li Han again. The kick was so strong that Li Han spat out blood. Simon immediately blocked him, saying, I know you're furious, but Li Han is our commander right now. If you do that again, I won't just stand by. Hearing Simon say that, he finally sighed and stopped. Simon then asked, But seriously, Li Han, are you sure you realize everything? That happened was because of you. If you come up with some half-baked plan, I'm going to beat you to a pulp before you're even forced to retreat. He continued explaining Li Han's plan, saying, I'll make my decision after hearing your plan. Though I hate to admit it, you're the sharpest kid among all the middle schoolers. Li Han spoke up then. Stop being so cranky and listen, Silent C. Honestly, things aren't actually that bad right now. He had to suppress his irritation upon hearing Li. Han said the current situation isn't bad. Li Han agreed, we want to get this moving quickly. It's because of the Enlo mage's fire mana and their ability to escape via teleportation. But we don't need to worry about that anymore. Simon acknowledged, You're right about the fire mana. That guy used up all his remaining explosions, but why do you think he can't teleport anymore? Li Han explained. For 15 years they've been hiding because they are extremely cautious and cunning. But right now, even though their lives are at risk, they still haven't broken formation. The truth is, the guy from earlier tried to drain the last bit of mental energy from the crystal. In reality, he had the Enlo warriors return to protect him instead of continuing to chase us, Li Han said seriously. He wouldn't need to do that if he were still capable of teleporting. There has to be a reason he isn't leaving that spot. The two of them stood there listening to Li Han for a moment. Mask nodded at Simon. All right, Li Han, tell us your plan. At this moment, Li Han was standing in front of the rift. In his hand was the flying bridge. He was going to catch the Enlo mage, and they were still standing right there, and they were performing a ritual. Li Han decided to ambush them from the spatial rift. He asked the two of them to distract the enemies from the front. Even if the Enlo mage could detect Li Han's mana, if that mana was released from the spatial rift, where a powerful energy was already radiating, it would be difficult for him to notice them. And his vision will also be obscured by the light from the rift. Simon replied, You'll be affected by that too, you know. Besides having your vision obscured, you'll also have to endure the intense pressure from the rift, right? Can you even maintain control under that kind of pressure? If there were even a single mistake, Li Han would surely die, but he didn't see it that way. He was confident in his own ability to control mana. Li Han was now standing before the rift, preparing to act, thinking, It's not that I want to cover up my own mistakes. It's just that I'm the only one who can do this. Just then Simon said to Silent, probably seeing his teammates in that pile of corpses. He's like a machine, a cold-blooded guy. But if you see a scene like that and don't react at all, you wouldn't be human anymore. But even in situations where everything turns sour due to his own mistakes, he can still observe the enemy and plan what needs to be done next. It's truly incredible. That's also the reason why Team 13 trusts Li Han so much. At that moment, he reached the edge of the rift and thought, Thank goodness I made it in time. He stood by the rift, throwing his backpack and hat down to check the depth, holding 2 glide balls in his hands. Every second counted now. He activated the ball with 15 minutes left on Simon's timer. Li Han jumped in to start the plan, throwing the 2 glide balls down. Then he leaped onto this side. Simon and Silent also rushed in to fight. The Enlo mage realized they were there. Blonde observed that there were even more Enlo warriors gathered here. The patrol units have returned. The ninja mask rushed forward and took down the first 3. Simon stood in the back, firing his rifle continuously at them, making them scream in pain. Just as they were about to turn and attack him, he was caught off guard, and Silent took down the 4th one. The 2 of them took out the enemies one by one with gunfire and sword strikes. It was incredibly smooth from the 2 of them. They coordinated perfectly with just glances and gestures. Everyone placed their faith in Li Han. They couldn't fail on their very first mission. Meanwhile, he was flying inside a massive source of energy, pressing down on his body. That feeling again. Li Han realized this was definitely the dragon's fear. Suddenly, a dragon with blood-red eyes and razor-sharp teeth appeared in his vision. He trembled, breaking into a cold sweat. He told himself, it's just a hallucination. The dragon opened its mouth as if it could swallow Li Han whole. Terrified, he had to bite his own arm until it bled to regain his focus. He flew toward the imaginary dragon. At this moment, on the side of the 2 teammates, they had taken down almost all the Enlo soldiers. Simon was getting tired, and there were only 2 left. The mage in the back finally joined the battle. They had to protect the Enlo mage, so they certainly wouldn't advance. Simon aimed his gun at the mage. The mage realized this and raised his hand to cast a spell. A burst of energy erupted to block the bullets from Simon. They saw the trajectory and used an external force shield to defend. That's good, but it only defends from the front. From behind the mage, a shadow suddenly appeared. It was Li Han. He lunged out of nowhere and restrained the mage holding a syringe filled with anesthetic. The soldiers were caught off guard and couldn't react. Seeing the situation, Silent rushed in like a flash. The soldiers were beheaded in an instant. The sedative was plunged into the mage's neck. Li Han began injecting the drug into him, thinking to himself, the worst-case scenario is that he'll teleport. A purple energy radiated from the mage's body. He was indeed trying to cast a teleportation spell. His body was slowly fading. Li Han panicked. Could it be? Did we fail? Finally, the sedative kicked in and he collapsed into his arms. They'd actually done it.